Caitlin Coons first met Jonathan Jones when she was only 15 years old, and he was 30. Their relationship would soon spiral into something deeply troubling. Caitlin, who had spent much of her young life in Ohio's foster care system, she was living in a group home in Canton when she first encountered Jonathan. She had faced numerous challenges throughout her childhood, bouncing between foster families and care facilities. She desperately seeking stability and someone who would truly care for her. Like many children in state custody, she had experienced multiple placements, each bringing its own disappointments. These constant moves had left her feeling abandoned, creating deep emotional wounds that made her vulnerable. Caitlin couldn't help but hope that each new placement would provide the loving, stable environment she craved, but these hopes were repeatedly dashed. Jonathan, 15 years her senior, seemed to offer the attention and affection that Caitlin had been searching for. However, their relationship was far from appropriate or legal. At 30, Jonathan was a grown man who should have known better than to pursue a romantic relationship with a 15-year-old girl. Caitlin couldn't help but be drawn to someone who appeared to understand her struggles and offered her the emotional connection she had been craving. What she didn't realize was that she was becoming involved with a predatory man who would ultimately lead her down a dark and destructive path. As their relationship developed, it became increasingly clear that Jonathan was taking advantage of Caitlin's vulnerable state. Caitlin's unstable past made her emotionally vulnerable, and she became dependent on Jonathan, who took advantage of her youth and desire for love. Jonathan manipulated Caitlin by exploiting her weaknesses. He told her she was mature, different, and their relationship was special. These tactics are commonly used by predators to make victims feel responsible for their own exploitation. Jonathan had complete control, and Caitlin became isolated, making it difficult for her to see that she was being manipulated and believed their relationship was genuine. Even though there were clear warning signs, her longing for love and inexperience with healthy relationships blinded her to the fact that she was being victimized. She saw Jonathan as her rescuer, the one finally giving her the love she desired. In March 2023, Jonathan's predatory behavior was exposed when he was convicted of enticing a child to view adult material and child endangerment. The court found that he had engaged in intimate with 15-year-old Caitlin and planned to sell photographs of their encounters. This revealed the extent of his exploitation and abuse. After the conviction, the court had ordered him to stay away from Caitlin and put a GPS tracker on him to monitor his location. Despite these efforts, tragedy was unavoidable. Nicole Jones, Jonathan's 53-year-old mother, lived in Sylvania Township. She was very worried about her son's relationship with the teenage girl, Caitlin. She was concerned about Jonathan's legal problems and the negative impact the relationship was having on both of them. As a caring mother, Nicole had seen her adult son making increasingly bad choices. She had tried to support him, but his relationship with a teenager and the resulting legal issues were almost too much to bear. Nicole felt stuck between her love for her son and her duty to protect a vulnerable young girl. The seriousness of the situation and the potential consequences of Jonathan's actions made her even more anxious. As a mother, Nicole had always tried to see the best in Jonathan, even when his behavior was clearly problematic. However, his relationship with Caitlin represented a new level of concern. The teenage girl was undeniably vulnerable and traumatized, and Jonathan appeared to be exploiting someone who needed protection. Nicole felt a sense of responsibility, not only for her son's actions, but also for Caitlin's welfare. She had repeatedly talked to Jonathan about the inappropriate nature of his relationship, pointing out the age difference and legal ramifications. She remained steadfast in her belief that Jonathan needed to end the relationship and seek help for the issues driving him to pursue someone so young and vulnerable. In April 2023, despite the court order, Caitlin made the fateful decision to leave her foster care placement in Canton. The 17-year-old girl, still deeply attached to Jonathan, couldn't resist what she believed was love. She met Jonathan at a local restaurant, and together they returned to his mother's home in Sylvania Township. Caitlin hoped this reunion would somehow make everything better, that they could find a way to be together without further problems. Nicole didn't know that Caitlin was secretly living in her house. Caitlin had climbed in through Jonathan's bedroom window and was hiding from Nicole. This created a stressful and difficult situation, as Caitlin was living a secret life in Nicole's home, where Nicole was trying to live normally. This situation put a strain on everyone. Nicole was unaware of everything happening in her own home, and it was becoming harder to keep Caitlin hidden. Caitlin had to stay quiet during the day and avoid being seen. Caitlin grew frustrated with the secrecy and the constant fear of being discovered, and she realized that this situation couldn't last. As days passed, the strain of keeping Caitlin's presence hidden became increasingly difficult. Jonathan knew it was only a matter of time before his mother discovered Caitlin's presence, and he knew his mother would not approve. It was evident that Nicole was genuinely concerned about both Jonathan's welfare and Caitlin's. However, her attempts to intervene and protect them would ultimately put her in grave danger. The tension in the household reached a breaking point when Caitlin became convinced that Nicole was the primary obstacle to her being with Jonathan. Warped by trauma and manipulation, Caitlin was unable to see that Nicole's concerns were legitimate and protective. Instead, she viewed Nicole as an enemy, deliberately trying to destroy her relationship. This perception fueled increasingly dark thoughts about how to eliminate the perceived obstacle. On April 19, 2023, Caitlin's frustration and desperation reached a dangerous crescendo. She made a decision that would forever change multiple lives. Caitlin gave Jonathan an ultimatum that was both shocking and terrifying in its cold calculation. Jonathan had 5 hours to kill his own mother, Nicole, or she would end their relationship forever. This demand was so extreme and disturbing that it revealed the depth of Caitlin's psychological disturbance and the toxic nature of their relationship. Jonathan, faced with this impossible choice, found himself paralyzed by fear and indecision. Although he had made numerous poor choices in his life, including his predatory relationship with Caitlin, the prospect of murdering his own mother was apparently beyond even his moral boundaries. As the 5-hour deadline approached, Jonathan could not bring himself to harm the woman who had given him life and had tried to help him throughout his struggles. Caitlin wanted Jonathan to kill Nicole. When he refused, she gave him an extra hour, hoping he would change his mind. But Jonathan still didn't act. So, Caitlin decided she would kill Nicole herself. She believed that for her relationship with Jonathan to work, Nicole had to die. Despite feeling troubled and pressured, she resolved to commit the murder since Jonathan wouldn't. On the evening of April 19, 2023, Nicole Jones stood in her kitchen, facing her refrigerator. Unbeknownst to her, Caitlin was outside and had found a large rock. Caitlin brought the rock inside, intending to use it as a weapon. Nicole continued her usual evening routine, completely unaware that Caitlin was about to end her life in a shocking and violent way. Her kitchen, normally a place of comfort, was about to become the scene of a brutal crime. As Nicole stood, with her back turned, focused on whatever she was retrieving from the refrigerator, Caitlin approached from behind with the rock in her hands. In a moment of pure evil and violence, Caitlin began bludgeoning Nicole over the head with the rock, striking her multiple times with brutal force. The attack was swift and merciless, giving Nicole no opportunity to defend herself or even understand what was happening. As if the bludgeoning wasn't enough to ensure Nicole's death, Caitlin then strangled her, making certain that she would never again interfere in her relationship with Jonathan. Jonathan was in the living room when his girlfriend, Caitlin, murdered his mother in the kitchen. Instead of calling for help or trying to save her, Jonathan chose to help Caitlin hide the crime. This decision made him an accomplice in a shocking murder case. They worked together to dispose of Nicole's body. They drove to 2 local stores, purchasing a tarp and garbage bags to wrap Nicole's lifeless body. They returned to the house and wrapped Nicole's body in the materials they had purchased. After wrapping the body, Jonathan and Caitlin loaded Nicole into the trunk. In perhaps one of the most disturbing details of this case, prosecutors later revealed that Jonathan and Caitlin actually went out to dinner while Nicole's body remained in the trunk. Following their dinner, they drove to a nearby apartment complex and disposed of Nicole's body in a dumpster, treating her as mere garbage to be discarded. The dumpster was collected the following day as part of the normal garbage pickup, and Nicole's body was taken to a landfill. Even though law enforcement searched thoroughly, Nicole's body was never found. This prevents her family from having the closure they would get from a proper burial. With Nicole's body disposed of, Jonathan and Caitlin decided to flee the area to avoid prosecution. They took Nicole's 2021 Buick Encore and began driving west, eventually crossing the border into Mexico. Along with the car, they also took Nicole's social security card, identification, credit cards, and health insurance card, essentially stealing her identity along with her life. However, their escape was short-lived. Caitlin, perhaps overwhelmed by the magnitude of her actions, made a critical error that would lead to their capture. While on the run, she contacted one of her caregivers and confessed to the murder, admitting that she had killed Jonathan's mother. This confession prompted the caregiver to immediately contact law enforcement, who began working with U.S. Marshals to track down Jonathan and Caitlin. The search for Jonathan and Caitlin became an international manhunt, with law enforcement agencies on both sides of the border cooperating to locate them. Fortunately for investigators, Jonathan was still wearing the Jeep's tracking device, mandated as part of his earlier conviction. This device allowed authorities to track their movements and ultimately locate them in the municipality of Ahumada, in the state of Chihuahua, Mexico, on May 8, 2023, approximately 3 weeks after Nicole's murder. U.S. Marshals and Mexican authorities successfully apprehended both Jonathan and Caitlin. They were found in possession of Nicole's vehicle and personal documents, providing further evidence of their guilt. Jonathan and Caitlin was extradited back to the United States to face charges for their roles in Nicole's brutal murder. Before, back in Ohio, law enforcement had been conducting a thorough investigation into Nicole's disappearance and presumed death. The investigation had begun on May 5, 2023, when Canton Police contacted Sylvania Township Police requesting a welfare check on Nicole Jones. When officers arrived at her condominium, they were unable to locate her despite conducting a thorough search of the premises. As the investigation unfolded, the true horror of what had transpired became clear. Detective Jake Albright of the Sylvania Township Police Department interviewed Caitlin extensively after her arrest, and she provided detailed confessions about how she had murdered Nicole. The case against both Caitlin and Jonathan was overwhelming. In addition to Caitlin's confessions, investigators had Jeep's tracking data from Jonathan's ankle monitor that corroborated the timeline of events and their movements after the murder. Surveillance footage from the stores where they purchased supplies further supported the prosecution's case against them. Initially, prosecutors charged Caitlin with aggravated murder, abuse of a corpse, felonious assault, and tampering with evidence. Given the serious nature of the charges and the calculated manner in which the crime was committed, the court decided to charge Caitlin as an adult. Despite her being only 17 at the time of the murder, Jonathan faced even more charges, including 2 counts of aggravated murder, felonious assault, aggravated burglary, aggravated robbery, tampering with evidence, and abuse of a corpse. However, as the case moved through the legal system, both defendants ultimately decided to accept plea agreements rather than face trial. On June 4, 2024, both Caitlin Coons, now 18, and Jonathan Jones, 33, appeared in Lucas County Common Police Court before judge. They each pleaded no contest to charges of aggravated murder and abuse of a corpse. As part of the plea agreement, prosecutors agreed to dismiss the remaining charges against both defendants. The judge sentenced each of them to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years. While this sentence ensures that both will spend decades behind bars, it also means that they could potentially be released while still relatively young, a thought that brings little comfort to Nicole's grieving family. During the sentencing hearing, the impact of Nicole's murder on her family became painfully clear. Nicole's brother, Robert Jones, who is the administrator of her estate, spoke about the devastating effect her loss has had on their family. Lucas County Prosecutor Julia Bates addressed the case following the sentencing, acknowledging the horror of what had transpired and expressing hope that the resolution would bring some measure of peace to Nicole's family. She said, "This was a horrific event." In her statement, they are relieved to reach a resolution in this case. They hope this brings some measure of peace to Nicole Jones's family. May her memory forever live in their hearts. As a result of this case, Robert Jones, representing Nicole's estate, has filed a civil lawsuit against Caitlin and Jonathan for wrongful death. The lawsuit seeks $25,000 in damages, in addition to punitive damages and other expenses. The suit acknowledges that no amount of money can truly make up for Nicole's death and the way it occurred. A tragic part of this case is that Nicole's body has never been found. Her family has been deprived of the fundamental right to give her a proper burial and have a place to remember and honor her. Not knowing where Nicole's remains are located intensifies their suffering. This case serves as a stark reminder of the devastating consequences that can result from predatory relationships and the exploitation of vulnerable individuals. Caitlin, who began as a victim of Jonathan's inappropriate pursuit when she was just 15, ultimately became a perpetrator of one of the most brutal murders imaginable. While this transformation does not excuse her actions, it highlights the complex dynamics that can develop when adults prey upon children who are already struggling with trauma and instability. The residents of Sylvania Township, especially those in Nicole's condominium complex, were deeply disturbed by the terrible crime. Many residents are elderly and had moved there because they thought it was a safe and peaceful place to live. The shocking murder of their neighbor by her son and his teenage girlfriend destroyed their feeling of safety and showed that violence can happen anywhere, even in quiet communities. As this case comes to a close with the sentencing of both perpetrators, Nicole Jones's family continues to struggle with their immense loss. It was evident to everyone that Nicole Jones was a caring mother who had tried to protect both her son and the teenage girl her son was exploiting. Her concern for their welfare ultimately cost her life as she became the victim of a crime so brutal and senseless that it continues to shock all who learn about it.
Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Lisa Valdez. Lisa Valdez was born on September 6, 1961, in San Francisco, California. She has an older brother and a loving mother. Although her father was absent from their lives, but Lisa and her mother shared an exceptionally close bond, rarely arguing. Those who knew them admired the harmony in their relationship. During her teenage years, Lisa developed a passion for dancing. She also became interested in IT, which was a relatively new field at the time. Notably, she was an early user of email, using it before many of her friends knew of its existence. This interest significantly influenced her future career path. Following college, Lisa got a job as a software analyst in San Francisco. Her mother later used her savings to purchase a small studio apartment for Lisa in a prestigious neighborhood, which offered a stunning city view. Living alone, Lisa advanced in her career, prioritized family time, and continued dancing, attending weekly practice sessions with her best friend. On May 16, 1998, Lisa, who was 36 at the time, hosted an evening gathering with her mother and some family friends. After the guests departed, her mother helped with the dishes and then headed home. Before leaving, Lisa promised to call her mother the next day, but the call never came. Initially, Lisa's mother thought she was simply busy, especially since she had dance practice scheduled for that day. However, As the day progressed without any communication from Lisa, her mother began to worry. The following day, Lisa's mother tried calling her, but there was no answer. She continued attempting to reach Lisa, but her calls went unanswered. On Monday, the fourth day since they last spoke, Lisa's colleagues contacted her mother to express their concern that Lisa had not shown up for work and was not responding to their calls. This was highly unusual, as Lisa was known for her reliability and always notified her workplace if she needed to take a day off. Lisa's mother grew increasingly concerned, so she decided to visit apartment complex to check on her. When she arrived, she witnessed a disturbing scene. The building was surrounded by police tape and there were a lot of police officers. She asked the police what was going on, and they told her that earlier that day, some residents had reported a strange smell coming from one of the apartments. The building manager checked and found an unlocked door, then went inside and found a body on the floor, and they called the police. The police then were promptly called to the scene. Police officers quickly identified the victim as Lisa. Her body showed clear signs of trauma and decomposition, indicating she had been murdered several days prior. The presence of blood stains on the floor and bed, along with her partially undressed state and underwear found next to her body, suggested she had been being attacked and sexually abused. The room was in disarray, but further investigation revealed that this was typical of Lisa's living habits. The TV was on, and the air conditioner was set to 78 degrees. No signs of robbery were present, with valuables and jewelry left untouched. However, Lisa's keys and a gym bag were missing. A peculiar detail was the removal of some of Lisa's hair by the attacker, hinting at strong personal motives. The numerous injuries on her body further supported this theory. The detective suspected that the killer might have had a prior relationship with Lisa and cherish a deep-seated hatred for her, given the lack of forced entry and the secure nature of the fenced apartment complex. Additionally, the apartment complex was secured with a fence, and access required either a key or to be let in by a resident. The police began interviewing residents in the apartment building, searching for someone who might have seen the attacker. They quickly found a lead when one of Lisa's neighbors reported that 2 days earlier, upon returning from vacation, he noticed damage to the metal frame of his front door and a faint blood stain. Although he had informed the manager, but they decided not to report it to the police, as it appeared his apartment had not been broken into. Detectives believed the same person who killed Lisa was responsible for the damage to the neighbor's door. However, the motives behind these actions were unclear. One theory was that the killer tried to break into the neighbor's apartment, was caught by Lisa, and subsequently murdered her. Another theory suggested the attempted break-in might have occurred after Lisa's murder, which seemed unusual. Detectives speak with the housekeeper who cleaned Lisa's apartment weekly. 2 days before Lisa's body was found, the housekeeper attempted to enter the apartment, but found the door blocked from the inside. Through a crack in the door, she saw a partially undressed woman on the floor and heard a man's voice. Believing she was interrupting a private moment, she left immediately. Police suspected that Lisa was already dead at this time and the man's voice belonged to her killer, who was still inside the apartment. The housekeeper mentioned a suspicious detail, a black bag with a zipper near the body. However, she was uncertain since she only caught a glimpse. On the inside of Lisa's apartment door, an envelope with cash was taped, untouched. This money was intended for the housekeeper, a frequent habit of Lisa. The fact that the envelope was still there suggests that Lisa was likely attacked after her mother departed, sometime between midnight and the early hours of the morning, which would have been when Lisa normally left the payment. Neighbors from the floor below corroborated these things. They reported hearing thuds and someone descending the stairs, although they didn't see the individual. As detectives searched Lisa's apartment, they discovered an unusual detail: the toilet seat was up, uncommon for a woman living alone. Forensic experts found a partial fingerprint that didn't match Lisa's. The police collected fingerprints from Lisa's acquaintances and relatives who may have visited her apartment. But none matched. This led detectives to believe that the fingerprint might belong to the killer. The medical experts completed their report, revealing new information about Lisa's case. Her body had over 20 stab wounds, but due to decomposition, it was unclear if she had been sexually assaulted. However, defensive wounds on her body suggested that Lisa had attempted to fight off her attacker. Furthermore, skin particles were found under her nails, which were likely from the killer, and were sent to the lab for analysis. In the meantime, forensic experts analyzed evidence from the apartment and discovered a crucial clue: a pillowcase with multiple blood stains. Upon closer examination, it was determined that not all of the blood on the pillowcase belonged to Lisa, as some of the stains were from a different source. As a result, the pillowcase was sent to the lab for further testing. Investigators suggested that the killer may have unintentionally hurt himself while stabbing Lisa, which can happen when using a knife. Supporting this hypothesis was the discovery of 2 bandages from a first aid kit inside the toilet. The killer might have used these to stop his bleeding and potentially left fingerprints on the toilet seat when disposing of the bandages. DNA analysis revealed that the blood on the pillowcase came from an unknown male not listed in the FBI database. This man's DNA also matched skin particles under Lisa's nails and a blood stain on her pillowcase. Despite no matches in the DNA database, detectives obtained the killer's DNA profile. They then compared it to DNA samples from suspects in their system who had committed crimes in Lisa's area and closely examined her acquaintances. Lisa's mother shared information about Lisa's relationship with a man named Albert Ketto, stating they had plans for a date the day following the murder. However, these plans were canceled by Albert a few days beforehand. When detectives questioned Ketto, they noticed a large cut on his hand, which made them suspect him as the killer. And he might have injured themselves while stabbing Lisa. Despite this, Albert denied any involvement in the murder. The detectives took his fingerprints and DNA samples for comparison, but surprisingly, they did not match the blood on the pillowcase or the skin particles found under Lisa's nails. Investigators continued their search for other suspects by reviewing the messages on Lisa's answering machine from the days leading up to the murder. After making a list of 40 people texting Lisa, they found one message particularly suspicious. Just hours before the murder, while Lisa still had guests at her home, a man called her, but she didn't pick up, he leaving a strange message: "You know how it goes, Tita. Hey Lisa, are you home?" When police played this message for one of Lisa's friends, the friend immediately identified the voice as Albert Robinson, a work colleague of Lisa's. Albert had made his feelings for Lisa known, but she had rejected his advances. Despite this, they remained friendly at work and, with Lisa considering him a friend. During the memorial service for Lisa, something else happened. Albert attended the service and delivered a speech that left everyone perplexed. He asserted that he and Lisa were intensely in love and had plans to get married and start a family. However, Lisa's friends and mother disputed Albert's things, stating that they were entirely false. According to them, Lisa had mentioned that Albert had expressed interest in her, but she did not reciprocate his feelings. Lisa's mother also emphasized that Lisa would have confided in her about such significant plans. Albert was questioned by the police and he denied being involved in Lisa's murder. He claimed to love her and said he would never hurt her. However, he refused to give the police his DNA sample and fingerprints, which raised suspicions. As a result, detectives continued to investigate him and look for new evidence. It is possible that Lisa's failure to reciprocate Albert's feelings made him hate her and kill her in revenge. The violent nature of the murder suggested that it was personal, and the fact that the killer cut off some of Lisa's hair and took it with him could be related to Albert's fixation on her. Detectives got a search warrant for Albert's house and found it filled with dozens of Lisa's photos, further evidence of his obsession. Despite this, he continued to deny any involvement in the murder. He voluntarily provided his fingerprints and DNA, which were sent to the lab for analysis. However, the lab results showed no match with the DNA and fingerprints found at the crime scene. As a result, he was cleared as a suspect, and the investigation continued. Years went by with no new leads, and the case remained unsolved. Investigators regularly checked DNA and fingerprint databases, hoping the killer would be caught for another crime, but there were no matches. Police were initially baffled that the perpetrator of such a heinous crime did not appear in any databases, so they doubted it was his first serious offense. Despite ongoing searches over the years, the police couldn't find any matches. Lisa's mother made multiple television appearances, pleading for anyone with information to come forward, yet detectives remained without new leads. In 2010, detectives discovered the FBI had begun utilizing a new DNA technology to identify suspects by comparing their DNA samples with those in the database to find relatives. This method, unlike genetic genealogy which emerged later, was only effective for locating close relatives, such as a father or brother. With no other leads, police requested a comparison in 2011 and waited. On September 2nd, lead detective Ive received a call from the FBI. They said that when the experts retested the DNA sample, they got a perfect match. The DNA from blood and skin particles under her nails matched a 52-year-old man named Anthony Hughes, who had recently been added to the FBI database. Anthony had a lengthy criminal record that went back decades, but previously, his crimes didn't qualify for his DNA to be included in the FBI database. However, due to updates in legislation, it became mandatory for individuals convicted of crimes in California to provide DNA samples, irrespective of how minor the offense was. Anthony's DNA sample was added to the database following his arrest for a minor shoplifting offense. In addition to his DNA, his fingerprints were also entered into the database, and they were found to match a fingerprint discovered on Lisa's toilet seat. Specialists were even able to pinpoint which specific finger left the print with relative ease. Before arresting Anthony, detectives searched for more evidence linking him to the crime. They stumbled upon a new clue. 13 years prior, police had reviewed messages left on Lisa's answering machine, but only those received before her murder. Now, after all these years, detectives found that Anthony had left a message for Lisa just a day after her death. The message itself was unremarkable and didn't raise suspicions. However, if the police had investigated Anthony at that time, they won't just find out his dense criminal history but also another important piece of information. Upon reviewing Lisa's belongings, detectives discovered Anthony's phone number in her address book, which confirmed that Lisa and Anthony knew each other. Further investigation, including conversations with Lisa's friends, revealed that Lisa and Anthony had dated briefly in high school. With this new information, detectives felt they had sufficient grounds to question Anthony. However, since he didn't have a fixed address at the time, they decided to approach him cautiously to prevent him from fleeing. When they arrested him, they initially told him that he was being investigated in connection with a series of robberies in San Francisco. Anthony surrendered without resistance. During the interrogation, detectives initially asked Anthony about the robberies. They then inquired about his relationship with Lisa. Initially, Anthony denied knowing Lisa, but when shown her photo, he acknowledged that they had known each other in high school. He also claimed that he hadn't seen her since the late 1980s. Detectives spent several hours questioning Anthony about his relationship with Lisa and whether he had seen her recently. When investigators confronted Anthony about the DNA evidence found in Lisa's apartment from 1998, his response was unexpected. He burst into tears and requested a pen and paper, seemingly prepared to confess. However, instead of writing a confession, he began hitting himself with the pen. Authorities had to restrain him as he continued crying and shouting, claiming he was being framed for a crime he didn't commit. Following this, Anthony was charged with Lisa's murder, and her family was informed that her killer had finally been caught. The trial was delayed by 4 years. Then, when it began, Anthony appeared confident, even smirking. However, later he began displaying religious symbols, such as carrying a Bible and wearing a cross. Detectives believed this was a tactic to sway the jury. Anthony's lawyer argued that he was physically incapable of committing the crime. A medical condition, diagnosed 5 years prior, had weakened his muscles, making it extremely difficult to perform repetitive movements. The lawyer argued that given this condition, Anthony could not have inflicted the more than 20 stab wounds found on Lisa. According to the medical report that year, Anthony's health condition was recovered well at the time of the murder. The prosecution had strong evidence that placed Anthony at the scene case, including his skin under Lisa's fingernails, his blood on a pillowcase, and his fingerprint on the toilet seat. However, regardless of the evidence against him, Anthony consistently denied having seen Lisa since the late 80s. The prosecution presented a theory that Anthony had gone to Lisa's home, attempted to initiate intimate contact with she, and when she rejected, he brutally murdered her. After the crime, he cut off a piece of her hair and took it with him as he fled. Anthony Hughes was ultimately given a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 16 years. In 2031, when he will be 72 years old. Anthony is currently serving his sentence in prison. However, he still maintains his innocence and says he was wrongfully convicted. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of April Jones. April Jones was born on April 4, 2007. April is a cheerful child, but she also has her own problems. Born 7 weeks early, she had some early health issues, but with medical support, she grew into a typical young girl. However, April was diagnosed with cerebral palsy, a condition caused by a brain injury, often due to a lack of oxygen at or shortly after birth. Cerebral palsy affected her lower body. Although her condition was not very severe, it caused her pain and made basic muscle movements difficult. Despite having a mild condition, she required special care. On October 1, 2012, at around 7 o'clock in the evening, 5 years old, April was playing outside with her friend at the Bryn Aeg housing estate in West Wales. Usually, April's parents don't let her go out to play when it's dark like that, but because she had received an excellent report card the day before, they allowed her extra playtime. April was supposed to return home after playing outside with her friend for about 20 minutes, but after that she did not return home. Her parents had last seen her on a bike, so they went out to look for her. They found April's 7-year-old friend nearby, but April wasn't with her. The friend explained that April had gotten into a car. Fortunately, she could describe the man who took April. He was wearing a green jacket, had blue or green eyes, brown hair, and a beard. Despite being young, the friend provided a crucial detail: she saw April get into the car on the driver's side. In the UK, the steering wheel is on the right side, which suggests the man was driving a left-hand drive car. Despite it being nighttime, but the police responded swiftly. The first officers reached the scene the 999 call. While search teams were being assembled, authorities interviewed people who knew April to determine if anything unusual had occurred that day or in the days before her disappearance. April's family couldn't think of anything that could help the police. April had gone to her swimming class earlier that day, and after returning home, she was allowed to play outside with her friends. It had only been a short while since April went out, but it was getting late in the autumn, so it would get dark soon, making it very difficult to find her. News of April's disappearance spread quickly throughout the neighborhood, through word of mouth and social networks. Within hours, locals left their homes to help search her. Although their intentions were good, this outpouring of support hindered the police investigation. The police were grateful for everyone's enthusiasm, but they still needed to conduct door-to-door inquiries to see if anyone had seen April or seen the person who might have taken her. The problem was that very few people were at home because most had gone out to assist with the search. The story of April's disappearance quickly drew national attention. Television crews and reporters from all over the country flocked to the small town to cover the incident. At 10:30, the police provided a status update to the public and media, voicing concern as they still hadn't found any leads related to April. They appealed to anyone with information to come forward right away. On the evening of October 1st, authorities released more details about April's disappearance. At the time she went missing, April was wearing her school polo shirt and a purple coat. Over 100 people had joined the search to support the police. The local community played a crucial role in the search, as their knowledge of the area invaluable. In addition to locals, a large number of volunteers from England traveled to Wales to assist, and several people from South Wales also joined the search. The search was difficult due to the town's surroundings, which included mountains, waterfalls, gorges, dense forests, and uneven terrain, all of which were exacerbated by the cold, rainy, and overcast autumn evening. The police divided the volunteers into multiple search teams, which then combed through a vast area of about 60 square kilometers. After 8 hours of searching the difficult Welsh terrain, by 3:30 a.m., the volunteers had thoroughly covered the area. Although the situation was desperate, there was a poignant beauty in the fact that many people were willing to give their time to help find little April. This outpouring of support must have brought some comfort to her family, who waited anxiously by the phone for news. However, the police had prohibited the family from joining the search, fear that they might encounter terrible things about their daughter. On October 2, 2012, April was still missing despite extensive nighttime searches. In response, the police in Wales issued a child rescue notice, a nationwide alert that disseminated April's description and that of her abductor to all UK police agencies. This was the first time the child rescue alarm had been sounded nationwide. 14 hours after April's disappearance, the media began pressuring the police to release every detail of their investigation. The police faced criticism for their handling of the case. But it can be argued that this was unfair. They had responded swiftly, organizing search parties and searching for April throughout the night, doing everything possible given the challenging weather. Detective Superintendent Andy John led the investigation, keeping the public and media informed with regular updates. To aid the search, he established roadblocks where officers stopped and inspected every vehicle. Posters with April's photo were also distributed, aiming to spark anyone's memory that might help locate her. People living nearby and those from farther away had been sending reports to the police. Many of these reports mentioned the same name, Mark Bridger. Several locals identified Mark as matching describe April's kidnapper. He was known as a Land Rover driver with blue eyes and short facial hair, and notably, his car had a left-hand drive. Witnesses reported seeing Mark or his car near where April went missing. They found the last known address of Mark and multiple attempts to contact him. However, both Mark and April were not present at the address. Mark has never encountered any legal problems before. However, some local residents reported that he had participated in the initial nighttime search for April. Due to the large number of volunteers, it was not possible to verify this information. The authorities shifted their focus to locating Mark. They deployed helicopters to scour the area from above while officers searched all locations on the ground. They discovered that Mark had recently moved into a cottage called Mount Pleasant. When police arrived, they found no one living there and there were no cars there. They entered the cottage and called out April's name, but there was no response. It was initially unclear whether Mark had been evading authorities. At 4:30, police announced that Mark had been captured. Before, a police aircraft spotted him walking his dog on a country road near April's family home. He appeared to have altered his appearance by shaving his head and beard. Police helicopters led patrol cars to Mark's location. When stopped by officers, he provided his name without attempting to hide his identity. The officer then inquired about April's whereabouts, to which he responded that it was an accident, claiming he had unintentionally crushed her with his car and was now unaware of her location. During the arrest, Mark became visibly emotional. The arresting officers informed him of his rights, stating, "You do not have to say anything, but anything you say may be used as evidence." Strangely enough, Mark was eager to talk, even though he didn't have to. The officers reminded him that he was free to speak or not. Mark told them he had been searching for April on foot day and night. His car, a left-hand drive Land Rover Discovery, was in the garage. He denied abducting her and said he tried to revive her but panicked. He only learned her name that morning from the news. He wished he could remember where he left her, saying she was lifeless on the seat. He apologized to April's family. Meanwhile, in April's hometown, a large-scale search operation was underway. Police, canine teams, volunteers, and mountain rescuers scoured the Welsh countryside, but couldn't find her. Volunteers numbering in the hundreds from all over the country worked relentlessly, usually only sleep for a few hours, then continue searching. The police received over 600 offers of help, with many suggesting areas to search. Thanks to local expertise, over 20 areas were thoroughly checked. At this stage, detectives had Mark Bridger in custody and were interrogating him. Mark immediately began discussing the incidents of that day. He stated that he had no knowledge of April's whereabouts and described his activities, which included attending a parent-teacher conference at his daughter's school and then parking near his girlfriend's house, also which is close to April's parents' house. Mark admitted to consuming a few drinks and seeing two girls riding their bicycles. He remembered the dark-haired girl riding behind his car, and claimed that when he looked for the other girl, she was nowhere to be seen, but then suddenly her bike appeared. Mark admitted that he had been nearby at the time of the incident and April was hit by his car while she was riding her bike. He claimed he was drunk at the time. He stated that he didn't intend to harm April, but knew he had made a mistake. He said he took her into his car to rush her to the hospital. Mark described April's condition, said her face had turned pale, and her lips were purple. He acknowledged that his actions led to her death and mentioned that he knew her parents. However, after this admission, Mark's memory became unclear. Despite initially being open about his involvement, but he couldn't recall what he did with April's body after she died. Even though the police tried to interrogate Mark many times, but they were hindered when he suddenly claimed to have amnesia. He repeatedly stated that he was in his house, couldn't find April, and wouldn't have abandoned her. Initially, Mark was cooperative and honest with the police, but they began to doubt his sincerity when he claimed memory loss at the exact moment April went missing and suspected that he might be withholding information. The police decided to tread carefully, they aware that using an aggressive tone during questioning might lead Mark to refuse further cooperation. The police obtained a statement from April's 7-year-old friend, claiming that April voluntarily got into Mark's car, appeared happy, and was smiling. It is unlikely that someone would deceive a child in this way without reason or motive. However, the police also had a witness who contradicted this account. The witness reported that April entered the Land Rover through the driver's door, which is actually the left-hand side door in the UK. This contradicts Mark's story, suggesting that his testimony may be fabricated. When confronted with this new information, Mark became uncomfortable. Despite this, he maintained his original story and showed no signs of wavering under various lines of questioning. Detectives employed a novel approach by consulting Dr. Joe Sullivan, a renowned expert in criminal body language and behavior. Dr. Sullivan's involvement went beyond analyzing Mark's interviews. He also visited his home to gather information for a psychological profile. What he found was astounding. Mark's home contained an assortment of disturbing items, including knives, handcuffs, and a shotgun, some of which were concealed, while others were openly displayed. Furthermore, he worked at a slaughterhouse. According to Dr. Sullivan's assessment, Mark was a fantasist who identified himself with fictional characters like Rambo, indicating a disconnection from reality. Despite Dr. Sullivan's advice, the police took a paternalistic approach with Mark. However, he stuck to his story. The police then relied on forensic specialists to thoroughly search his house for evidence. The search team found small specks of blood in the restroom, but at that point, it was unclear whose blood it was. It was possible that the blood came from he cutting himself while shaving. The police sent the samples to the laboratory, but it would take up to 24 hours to get the results. Dr. Sullivan warned the police that Mark was unlikely to feel empathy or guilt about his actions. Although he might try to pretend otherwise, but Dr. Sullivan believed that he lacked these emotions. As a result, Dr. Sullivan advised the police that appealing to his better nature would be pointless, as he didn't have one. The police cannot expect Mark to be remorseful, sympathetic, or confess his guilt. The police took Dr. Sullivan's advice seriously and redetained Mark on suspicion of murder. This sudden turn caught Bridger off guard, and him pale. Furthermore, explicit child photos were discovered on his laptop, leading to his second arrest for possessing offensive images of children. As the investigation intensified, Mark suspected the police had more information than they were letting on. Meanwhile, April's parents were informed on Thursday, 3 days after her disappearance, that the police had shifted their focus from finding her alive to investigating a murder case. They had to break the devastating news to their children that they had lost a sister. Receiving news that their daughter was presumed dead, but her body hasn't been found yet, was a difficult pill to swallow. The police kept this information from Mark, but they also advised the volunteers who had been tirelessly searching for April to stand down and let the experts handle the situation. However, this suggestion was met with resistance from the hundreds of volunteers, many of whom were in tears as they left the site. On Friday, 4 days after April vanished, police search teams continued their search for clues. There was no evidence that Mark killed April, according to forensic experts. A thorough examination of his Land Rover revealed no marks, no blood, no hair, and no skin. This was despite Mark's claim that there should have been signs of April's injuries, such as scratches on the bumper or blood or hair inside the car. He tried to explain by saying he didn't see any blood on April after his car hit her. Although April was run over, she didn't appear to have any open wounds. However, Mark's story was about to be exposed as a fabrication. On Friday night at 6:15 p.m., the lab contacted the detectives. The results of the DNA comparison between April's toothbrush and the blood spatters found in Mark's restroom. They matched. Additionally, DNA evidence was found on his fleece collar and jogging bottoms. After gathering enough evidence, the police charged April. They found photos on his laptop, which they showed him during questioning. The photos depicted minors being sexualized, exploited, and manipulated. However, Mark denied any wrongdoing, claiming he didn't enjoy things, despite being shown the images and asked to describe them. The photos were disturbing and something no reasonable person would have. Mark also denied searching for explicit websites for personal gratification, even when confronted with his internet search history. After 3.5 days in custody, the police's 96-hour questioning period was almost over. They made one last attempt to get Mark to tell the truth. The decision to press charges now rested with the Crown Prosecution Service. The police questioned Mark about April's whereabouts and whether he intended to murder her. They pointed out that no blood was found on the bathroom walls at his house, yet a full DNA profile of April was discovered. Mark claimed that if he had blood on his hands and didn't dry them, he might have accidentally flicked blood onto the walls. However, This contradicted his previous statement that he hadn't experienced any issues with blood for a week prior. Despite the inconsistencies, Mark stuck to his story, stating that some blood must have been present, even though he had previously claimed there was no blood on him or April, or in the car. Mark was subjected to intense police questioning regarding the images found on his laptop. The police were struggling to find ways to get him to reveal the truth. When asked if he was using the photographs for self-gratification, he denied it. However, he did suggest that a buildup of sexual frustration might have contributed to his actions on the morning in question. Mark's composure eventually began to crack under the pressure of questioning. He became agitated, raised his voice, and started using profanity. It was clear that he took issue with being labeled a pedophile. After a lengthy and challenging process, the police were finally able to uncover Mark's true nature. They were convinced they had the right person and had already submitted the case to the Crown Prosecution Service, CPS. The CPS subsequently authorized the police to charge Mark with the abduction and murder of April Jones. When informed of the charges, Mark showed no emotion or remorse. As he arrived at court in a prison van, everyone threw objects and shouted obscenities at him. Over the next 2 weeks, forensic investigators found more and more blood traces from April at Mark's house. The fireplace also contained several broken bones, but they were so badly decomposed that it was impossible to confirm if they belonged to April. On May 30, 2013, a jury convicted 47-year-old Mark Bridger of kidnapping and murdering April Jones. Judge Mr. Justice Griffith Williams described Mark as a chronic liar and a pedophile who had long harbored fantasies about young girls. However, the judge believed that he was not specifically targeting April, but rather was pursuing a young girl in general. Unfortunately, April became the poor victim of Mark's actions. Mr. Justice Griffith Williams immediately sentenced Mark Bridger to life in prison, with the details of his sentence to remain undisclosed to the public. Mark claimed that April's death was a tragic accident, resulting from his car hitting her. However, his credibility had been lost long before his trial, in the eyes of both law enforcement and the judicial system. Given the overwhelming evidence against him, Mark was unable to escape justice. April was a young girl who was playing outside with her friend. Then she was targeted by an individual with a twisted mind. April's family was relieved that Mark would spend the rest of his life in prison, unable to harm any more children, despite their overwhelming grief. However, April's remains were never found after the trial. While 17 bone fragments were discovered in Mark's house, but it was impossible to point out that they belonged to April. April's passing has left an unfillable void in the hearts of her loved ones. It is hoped that her family and friends can find some way to rebuild their lives. A funeral service for April was held in her hometown on April 26, 2013. May April Jones rest in peace. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Madison Sparrow. Madison Elizabeth Sparrow was born on September 12, 2003, in Norfolk, Virginia, United States. She is the daughter of Heather Sparrow Murphy and Richard Prestige. In her family, Madison has older sisters Wendelin. Wendelin, who was born in 1999 in Durango, Colorado, is Madison's older sister from her father's previous relationship. The family later settled in Newark, Newcastle County, Delaware. On October 5, 2010, her family welcomed a new member, baby Molly. Madison loves children and often takes on the role of the eldest in the family, which includes 8 cousins. She enjoys doing things that make people happy and frequently spends time playing with children or participating in entertainment shows such as magic shows. It is easy to catch Madison in a happy moment. Her laughter is contagious, showing her youthful and cheerful spirit. However, Madison can also be thoughtful and dreamy at times. Madison's father said that since she was a child, she has displayed her wisdom through careful observation and reflection before making decisions. Additionally, she is a very emotional person. Her warm hugs can uplift anyone's mood. For her friends and family, Madison is always a reliable confidant who genuinely cares about the happiness of those she loves. Madison is a curious girl who loves to explore new things, which led her to join the Girl Scouts, an organization for girls around the world. By the fall of 2012, all the Girl Scout troops were full, but thanks to her mother's efforts, Madison was able to join a group. Madison's mother led a new Brownies troop, and Madison joined at age 9. In recent years, Madison has become one of the top cookie sellers, winning numerous medals for her impressive sales. She has been involved with the Girl Scouts for nearly 10 years, during which time she has built a strong network of friendships. Currently, Madison volunteers with her younger SI. Stir Molly's troop, as she enjoys working with other young people and making a positive impact on their lives. Madison is a kind and generous girl who acts with commitment to her faith in God and service to her country. She is passionate about helping others and strictly adheres to the principles of the Girl Scouts. However, like any other young girl, Madison also enjoys spending time having fun and living life to the fullest. Even in her teenage years, she is always the life of the parties. She often plans parties with her friends, ranging from movie nights to full-blown beauty parties with manicures and pedicures. Madison frequently stays up all night, so it is not unusual for her to struggle to wake up by noon the next day. Before finishing elementary school, Madison met Annika Stalczynski, a girl her age who was born in Newark on July 9, 2003. They quickly became close friends and studied for exams together. Information about Annika's life is limited, but it is known that her parents are Robert Stalczynski and Robin Kars. In 2004, her family lived on Arona Mink Drive in Newark. After finishing elementary school, Annika and Madison went to middle school, where they made a new friend named Noah Sharp. Noah, a native of Newark, was born on August 23, 2001. Little is known about Noah's family and background, except that his mother, Nikki Sharp, has 2 other children, David and Brianna. The trio often went out for ice cream or spent time in the large green spaces around the city. When Noah and Madison met by chance, they felt an attraction to each other, and after just a few months, a teenage romance developed. At first, they were madly in love, but in early 2020, after more than a year together, Madison decided to break up with Noah without providing any reasons. They parted ways amicably and agreed to remain friends, but Noah was heartbroken because he still loved her deeply. During this time, Annika became Noah's trusted friend. They began to see each other more often and text almost every day. Although Noah's heart was still broken, he began dating another girl after a while. Despite his relationship with Annika, Noah kept in touch with Madison. He visited Madison on her 17th birthday, September 12, 2020, and brought her a gift. It seemed that Noah was still upset about the breakup. When Annika learned about her boyfriend's meeting with his ex-girlfriend, she felt jealous. She could not accept that he was still friends with his ex. Noah's sadness also turned to anger. He wanted to hurt Madison because he felt hurt. The following week, blinded by hatred and jealousy, Annika and Noah began planning to end Madison's life. They exchanged text messages, used FaceTime, and met in person to discuss weapons and how to dispose of the body after the crime. The messages they sent each other while planning the attack were horrifying and revealed their intention to cause Madison great pain. Annika made several suggestions, including using a knife to inflict serious damage to her heart. They also discussed the possibility of using a handgun or another blunt object. According to official documents, they quickly dismissed the idea of a handgun because it would make too much noise. Although Noah was not entirely confident, they decided to use a blunt object. During their discussions, they calculated the number of bricks they would need to hold Madison's body underwater if they decided to dump her there. When in doubt, one idea was to bury her since Noah could dig a hole and knew where to find a shovel. Eventually, they came up with what they believed was the perfect plan. Madison was an ice cream lover and also cherished Halloween. She eagerly awaited October each year to celebrate her favorite holiday. Throughout the month, Annika had been studying Madison's interests and taking advantage of them. On Friday, October 2nd, 2020, she called Madison to ask her out for ice cream and to spend a day together. Madison agreed because she hadn't seen her friend in a long time and also wanted to buy a gift for Molly, whose birthday was just 3 days away. That day, Madison wore black tights, denim shorts, gray boots, a blue sweatshirt that said New Jersey, and white ghost earrings. She rarely wore jewelry, especially earrings, but since she didn't have much time to prepare for Halloween, Madison decided to buy these earrings to match the holiday. At 2:44 p.m., she said goodbye to her mother, Heather, promised to see her later, and then left. Although nothing unusual happened at that time, the events that followed were extremely unsettling. That was the last time her mother saw her alive. Just hours later, Heather began receiving abusive text messages from Madison's phone number, along with information suggesting that Madison was supposed to be leaving the country. Heather thought it was a joke. She replied and wished Madison good luck in her endeavor, joking that she had forgotten to bring her passport, which was in the safe. However, Heather received no response. Even when she called her daughter, no one answered. Heather, who was hanging out with Molly and taking her to scout meetings and swimming lessons, was confused. The lack of response began to worry her. Heather decided to call Annika, knowing that they would meet later in the day. When Annika answered, she burst into tears and explained that Madison had insulted her and that she had dropped her off near a store. Annika then suggested contacting Noah, but he did not respond. Frustrated, Heather asked Annika to contact Noah again. The three of them chatted but did not get any information. Frustrated, Heather decided to go home. On the way home, Heather received several messages from her daughter's friends, who had also received strange messages and wanted to know what was going on. When she got home and did not search for any clues, Heather found no signs that her daughter had run away. Even the money she had received for her birthday, her clothes, and her C.D. cards were in her room. These messages were strange and nonsensical. Madison had no reason to run away, especially without a bag containing her clothes and money. When Madison did not return home at around 8:30 p.m., Heather contacted 911 and reported her daughter missing. Despite repeated attempts to reach out to people, all her efforts were in vain. After being informed of the situation, Heather's parents traveled from another city to support their daughter. Furthermore, she notified Madison's father, with whom she had divorced, who now lived in Colorado. He quickly shared the information on social media, calling for help in finding his daughter. On Saturday, October 3, 2020, the search for Madison, 17, who was reported missing, continued. Delaware State Police issued a yellow alert to activate all necessary procedures to search for missing persons. Over the course of 2 days, police search teams, family and friends searched farms near the University of Delaware, where Madison was last seen. The media also disseminated information about the search, asking people to come forward with any details. Delaware State Police have begun questioning Madison's friends, and evidence points to her ex-boyfriend as a suspect. According to information, the girl went to the woods in Newark behind the elementary school, where she was also seen with Noah on the day she went missing. Detectives then detained and questioned him for nearly 9 hours from October 4th to 5th, but he claimed he had no idea what had happened. He eventually confessed to his actions and revealed that Annika was an accomplice. He explained that Annika hated Madison because she was jealous of their relationship. He also shared his deep feelings about breaking up with her. According to Noah's testimony, he drove Madison to the woods behind the elementary school, then hid behind the bushes with an aluminum baseball bat. As Madison happily walked along the trail, he suddenly emerged from his hiding place and hit Madison twice in the head. Noah admitted to putting all his strength into the second blow, adding that it was then that he became enraged after months of losing control over the girl who had broken his heart. Unable to control himself, he continued to strike her body multiple times. After the attack, the two used Annika's car to transport her body to a location near the intersection of I-95 and the Delaware state line, about 15 minutes away from the scene and near a warehouse. Once there, they attempted to drown the body in the river. Unsuccessful, they opted to bury it in a shallow grave they dug in the same location. Armed with detailed information from the suspect, investigators carefully searched the designated area. There, they discovered an aluminum baseball bat used as a weapon, with traces of blood. The crime scene also revealed the victim's clothing, with some items showing evidence of having been burned. The suspect then led law enforcement to a large plot of land near the intersection of I-95 and the Delaware state line, where he and his accomplice had secretly buried the body. On Monday, October 5, 2020, Corporal Heather Piper announced the discovery of Madison's body. The news sent shockwaves through the victim's family, friends, and community. Several days later, on Saturday, October 9th, hundreds gathered at the high school football field to remember and honor Madison. An autopsy revealed that Madison died from blunt force trauma to the head. Experts also found the DNA of Noah and Annika on physical evidence collected at the scene and where the bodies were found. Noah faces charges of first-degree murder, possession of a deadly weapon during the commission of a felony, and first-degree conspiracy. He has been placed in a correctional facility on a $1 million bail. More than a month after the tragic event and after processing the necessary evidence, Annika, 17, was also arrested. She was indicted by a Newcastle County grand jury on charges of first-degree murder, possession of a deadly weapon during the commission of a felony, and first-degree conspiracy. Meanwhile, Madison's family has been struggling. Heather has repeatedly stated that the exact cause of her daughter's death may never be known. Although Noah admitted his guilt to the police, he did not plead guilty in his formal court filing. This has led to speculation that his defense attorney may argue that he was mentally unstable. In some cases, attorneys often attempt to defend their clients by referring to their mental health status. Similarly, during a preliminary hearing, Noah's attorney stated that Noah was being treated for schizophrenia and was under the care of a psychiatrist at the time of the murder. Noah's attorney confirmed that he had been injured in Chester County, Pennsylvania, about 3 weeks before the murder. The attorney explained that Noah had suffered memory loss and other problems as a result of the head injury. However, the attorney did not provide specific information about the cause and severity of the injury. In May 2021, Annika pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and first-degree conspiracy. Her attorneys negotiated with prosecutors, and Annika agreed to testify against Noah regarding his intention to kill Madison. Several people close to the victim had reported to the police about alter ego, Noah's alleged alter ego. However, prosecutors argued that Noah himself had disseminated this information, intending to use it at trial later as part of his plan to kill Madison. After 2 years of waiting, the defendant's trial began on October 20, 2022, in Newcastle County. During the proceedings, approximately 30 witnesses were called, primarily by Deputy Attorney General Matt Foley and an assistant prosecutor. The courtroom played hours of video recordings of Noah's interviews with state police detectives. Viewers heard Noah's changing story until he finally confessed. The defense tried to challenge this evidence, arguing that the police had interrogated their client for too long. Attorney Monica Jerome noted that the detectives interfered with the interrogation, directing Noah to say what they wanted and forcing him to say it. However, most people viewed this as a last-ditch effort to justify the murderer in any way possible. The prosecution presented text messages exchanged between Noah and Annika, which they claimed showed that the two had planned the crime. Faced with this evidence, the defense attempted to convince the court that someone else had control of the suspect's device and that he was not the one who contacted Annika. However, the testimonies of Noah's mother and brother contradicted each other several times when they were called to testify. Nikia stated that her son came home on the evening of October 2nd without being wet. Meanwhile, David said that his brother was wet and looked like he had just come out of a swamp. Nikia reported that when her son arrived home, Annika came in and seemed normal. David, on the other hand, claimed that Annika came in angry and slammed the door. Prosecutor Matt Froley asked Nikia if she had discussed the evidence against Noah with him, to which she replied no. However, prosecutors obtained a recording of a phone call that took place a month before the trial, in which the defendant and his mother discussed surveillance camera footage at the elementary school. During that conversation, Noah informed his mother that his face was not visible in the video showing him and Annika near the school an hour before Madison was murdered. His mother reacted with relief at this news. However, the video showed an African-American man of similar height and build to Noah, holding a baseball bat while walking into the woods with a girl. The defense questioned the defendant's relatives about the two injuries he allegedly sustained. The first was a head injury on September 13, 2020. The second was another unconfirmed injury he suffered after falling off his bike, just hours before his police interview on October 4th. Noah's lawyers argued that these injuries could have caused dissociative amnesia, attempting to justify the statements he made to the police. The court considered the arguments of both the prosecution and the defense regarding the victim's injuries. Annika, the accused, gave a 3-hour testimony that supported the prosecution's arguments. During her testimony, she calmly explained that Noah had convinced her that Madison had talked badly about her behind her back. However, Madison's family and friends insisted that she had never spoken ill of her friends. After 8 days of trial and more than 250 pieces of evidence presented by the prosecutors, the jury took just 3 hours to reach its final verdict. Noah Sharp was found guilty on all counts, including first-degree murder, and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. When the jury's verdict was announced, neither Noah nor his mother showed any emotion, Noah simply reneged and smiled at his mother. The Madison family cried tears of relief before leaving the courtroom. In Annika's case, when she was convicted, prosecutors stated that under Delaware law, she would be sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 30 years, since she was a juvenile at the time of the crime. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Alex Murdaugh. Richard Alexander, Alex Murdaugh, born May 27, 1968, is a member of a prominent and well-connected South Carolina legal family. The Murdaugh family has dominated the region's legal system for more than 100 years, with 3 consecutive generations serving as district attorneys of the 14th Judicial District from 1920 to 2006. However, that dynasty has come to an abrupt end for Alex. The Murdaugh family has been building the foundation for their success for decades. Specifically, when Alex's great-grandfather, Randolph Murdaugh Sr., founded the law firm Peters, Murdaugh, Parker, Elaf, and Dietrich, PMPD, they became an influential family in the area. Their strong presence led to the Hampton area being referred to as Murdaugh County. Alex sought to follow in his family's footsteps and pursued a law degree at the University of North Carolina. While in college, he met and married High's wife, Margaret Maggie Brandstetter, in 1993. They began seeing each other in 1991 and were married on August 14, 1993, at the Second Presbyterian Church in South Carolina. Alex, a personal injury attorney who works at the family firm PMPD, seeks to continue the family legacy. Unlike previous generations of Murdaughs, however, Alex abused the power and influence of the family business to cover up financial crimes, theft, and even suspected murder. His nefarious dealings lasted for more than a decade until his youngest son, Paul, died in a boating accident. Paul's boating accident was the latest in a string of suspicious deaths linked to the Murdaugh family. Many believe that these deaths were not actual accidents but part of a larger cover-up. Given the history and resources of the Murdaugh family, this theory seems plausible, especially considering how they handled Mallory Beach's death. Paul Murdaugh sailed his family boat to a party on Pucas Island on February 23, 2019. Having just graduated from high school, Paul and his girlfriend Morgan Dowdy, along with Anthony Cook and Mallory Beach, wanted to have a party in a night of unsupervised fun. They planned to start the night with a house party and oyster roast on the island. However, parties can't start without alcohol, so Paul bought some beer and hard liquor using his brother's ID. They left the Murdaugh River house at 7 p.m. By midnight, they were ready to continue their fun, so Paul decided to steer the boat to downtown Beaufort. There, he and Connor, a teenager, also joined the boat party, had 2 rounds of drinks around 1 a.m. On the way back to the boat, Paul and Connor were caught on a surveillance camera. At this point, Paul had been drinking heavily, and according to other passengers, he began to act strangely around 1:15 a.m. As they sailed, the situation became more complicated. The group started to disagree with Paul as he steered the boat in a disoriented manner and acted as if he were drunk. Mallory recalled that Anthony asked Paul to take him to a nearby rock to get off, but Paul refused. Morgan later commented that Paul took his hands off the wheel several times to argue with her, which made Mallory very nervous. GPS data from the boat's Garmin device indicated a period of acceleration. Paul, however, denied pushing the boat forward, but he was at the wheel at 2:20 a.m. when the boat hit the bridge, throwing Mallory into the water. The other teens were also in danger. Connor suffered a broken jaw and Morgan sustained a serious hand injury. Connor called 911 and help arrived immediately. When Deputy Beaufort arrived, the teens were in a state of chaos. The first thing he noticed was that Anthony was in distress. He reported that when he saw Paul smiling, Anthony actually tried to run past him to get to Paul. Police reported finding blood in the main cabin of the boat and a large crack in the hull from the collision. All of the teens were intoxicated and were taken to the hospital for treatment, except for Anthony. Everyone agreed to treatment except Paul, who was highly agitated and had a blood alcohol level of 0.243, while above the legal limit. Paul's father, Alex, was present that night, going from room to room trying to calm everyone down and control the situation. After 8 days of searching, Mallory's body was finally found. The autopsy revealed that she died from blunt force trauma to the head and subsequent drowning. Several witnesses, including Paul's girlfriend Morgan, testified that Paul was speeding in the boat that night. However, Paul was neither arrested nor charged. This led to speculation that Alex may have intervened in the legal process to help his son escape punishment. In March 2019, the Murdaugh family was sued for wrongful death. Mallory's family alleged that Paul's mother, Maggie, knew her son was intoxicated while the group was boating. Additionally, they claimed that his brother Buster provided the paperwork necessary for the group Oh, purchase alcohol. It was not until April 18, 2019, on Mallory's 20th birthday, that Paul was charged with 3 felony counts of operating a boat while intoxicated, resulting in her death and the serious injury of 2 other passengers. Paul pleaded not guilty and was released on $50,000 bail. Unfortunately, Paul's trial date never arrived. He died before the case could proceed. Another death that appears to be linked to the Murdaugh family is that of Stephen Smith, an openly gay teenager whose body was found on July 8, 2015, lying in the middle of a road in Hampton County, South Carolina. The cause of death for the victim was severe head trauma. The incident was initially ruled a hit-and-run accident, and no suspects were arrested. However, the victim's mother believes her son was murdered in a hate crime. Stephen had been classmates with Buster Murdaugh in high school. In addition to their friendship, there were rumors that the two had been romantically involved. Some have suggested Buster was involved in Stephen's death and that the story of him running away after the accident was a lie. On March 22, 2023, the South Carolina Department of Law Enforcement reopened the case, confirming that his death was indeed a homicide, although no suspects have been named. Another case involves the Murdaugh family. Gloria was the longtime housekeeper for Alex's family. On February 2, 2018, she suffered a serious head injury after falling down the stairs at the Moselle mansion. She later died on February 26, 2018, from complications related to the accident. Alex claimed that his dogs greeted Gloria at the top of the stairs, causing her to trip and fall backward, leading to the accident. It is unclear why no autopsy was performed to confirm Alex's version of events. Gloria's death certificate listed the cause of death as natural causes. Gloria's sons sued for their mother's untimely death in 2018 and were awarded a $1.4 million insurance settlement in 2020. However, the money and reached them. Alex allegedly plotted to collect the insurance money, approached Gloria's sons, and encouraged them to sue him, even introducing them to an attorney named Corey Fleming. Corey Fleming was a longtime friend and associate of one of Alex's sons. They conspired to defraud and steal the Gloria family's insurance money. They wired the insurance money into Alex's bank account without notifying the Gloria family that they had received the money. Gloria's sons then filed a new civil lawsuit on September 15, 2021, against Alex. On the same day, state investigators opened a criminal investigation into Gloria's death. Investigators are trying to determine whether there is any criminal liability in her death. Based on a request from the Hampton County coroner, they found that Gloria's cause of death was not due to natural causes. After Gloria's family gave permission, authorities conducted an autopsy to investigate further. In late September 2021, Alex faced multiple charges related to financial misconduct and embezzlement. Before the Gloria family sued, Alex had been involved in fraud and embezzlement for nearly a decade. Alex was accused of participating in a money laundering and painkiller abuse scheme that lasted from October 2013 to September 2021, along with his distant cousin and co-defendant, Curtis Smith. On September 4, 2021, Alex and Curtis conspired to commit murder. Alex provided Curtis with a gun and instructed him to shoot Alex himself, intending for Buster, Alex's only surviving son, to collect Alex's life insurance policy after his death. Curtis went to the location Alex had prepared, where Alex pretended that his tire was flat, and Curtis shot him as instructed. However, the bullet only caused minor injuries to Alex, who called 911 himself. When local law enforcement inspected the scene, they recognized signs of foul play but were unable to prove it. A few days later, Alex admitted that he had conspired with Curtis and staged the shooting. His Lawyer informed him that he was mentally unstable and that malicious elements were taking advantage of the situation. They claimed that Alex wanted to commit suicide so that Buster could collect a $10 million life insurance policy. Alex turned himself in when he learned a warrant had been issued for his arrest and was charged with fraud and conspiracy to commit insurance fraud. He filed a police report just 2 days after the incident. Alex announced that he would resign from his family law firm and enter rehab for treatment. After his release, he was quoted as saying that he had made many decisions that he regretted. In September 2021, the South Carolina Supreme Court indefinitely suspended Alex's law license. Further investigation into Alex's life revealed that he had committed several financial crimes, including tax evasion, embezzlement, and misappropriation of funds from clients and the law firm where he worked. Alex was released from rehab on October 14, 2021, and was later arrested. He was charged with 2 felony counts of fraud. The arrest was based on an investigation into the misappropriation of investment funds related to the unnatural death of Gloria. This time, Alex was denied bail. This was just the beginning of Alex's legal troubles. On November 18, 2021, he was indicted on 27 counts of financial fraud, including allegedly stealing money from clients, other lawyers, and the family of his deceased housekeeper. On December 9, 2021, an additional 21 charges were filed against Alex, bringing the total to 48. The charges include 1 count of counterfeiting, 4 counts of money laundering, 7 counts of computer crime, and 9 counts of breach of trust with intent to commit fraud, among others. It is estimated that Alex stole more than $6.2 million from his victims. The investigation into Alex's business dealings has been ongoing, with new charges being filed against him. By June 2022, the total number of charges against him had reached 81. On July 13, 2022, when Alex was officially disbarred, he faced a total of 84 criminal charges and 11 lawsuits. Mallory Beach's mother, whose daughter was a 19-year-old victim, was one of several people who filed lawsuits related to the estate of Margaret and Paul Murdaugh. The prominent attorney's alleged financial misconduct has raised questions about his character and conduct. The South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, SLED, has decided to review what they know and have accepted as the truth about the double murder and further investigate the financial crimes against Alex. Investigators realized that this was a troubled marriage. Alex and Maggie were experiencing marital difficulties. Maggie was living separately at the family home on Edisto Island, which is a little over an hour's drive from the Moselle estate. Maggie's sister, Marion Branstetter, told police that Maggie had no plans to see her husband on the night of the murder. Alex contacted Maggie on that fateful day, asking her to come to the family hunting lodge. He wanted her to accompany him to visit his father, who was dying and could pass away at any moment. Initially, she did not want to go but texted a friend, saying that her husband's behavior was suspicious and that he might be planning something. She suggested they meet at the hospital instead of following her husband. Eventually, she agreed to drive to the Moselle estate before going to the hospital to visit her ailing father-in-law. However, she was murdered before she had a chance to see him. Maggie and her youngest son were murdered at the Murdaugh family's 1,700-acre farm in Moselle, which included a house, a doghouse, a cabin, and wetlands. Maggie and Paul were shot multiple times near the doghouse. Paul was shot twice with a shotgun, while Maggie was shot 5 times with a different weapon, which ballistics analysis showed was a .300 caliber round from an AR-style rifle. Alex stated that he had taken a long nap that day before visiting his dad, who suffered from dementia. He claimed he was gone for about 45 minutes to an hour and a half, and when he returned, he found his wife and youngest son dead on the floor near the doghouse. Law enforcement reviewed Alex's schedule that night, and he admitted that he had taken a nap on the couch before leaving for his dad. In this case, police investigated the motive behind prominent attorney Alex's murder of his family. Investigators found a key clue. Weeks before the killings, a grand jury subpoenaed Alex's finances for a probe related to his son Paul's 2019 fatal boating accident. This may have been the primary motive. Alex is worried that all his financial wrongdoing will be exposed following a hearing scheduled for June 10, 2021. Furthermore, his law firm has uncovered his misuse of company funds. Gene Singer, the company's chief financial officer at the time, confronted Alex about the missing money on June 7, 2021, the day of the murder. State authorities say the financial pressure CA used Alex to panic and fear that his world was falling apart. Once a prominent lawyer in South Carolina, Alex devised a bold plan to hide his financial crimes. However, these acts are gradually becoming public and drawing sympathy away from him. On July 14, 2022, 13 months after the shooting that killed his wife and son, Alex was charged with their murders. His trial commenced with charges of murder and possession of a weapon during the commission of a violent crime. The prosecution claimed that Alex used both a handgun and an AR rifle to shoot and kill his wife and son at close range. The murder weapons were never found. Alex's defense team argued that the shootings were carried out by two different shooters based on the weapons used. An expert witness for the defense stated that the height of the shooters could have ranged between 5 feet 2 inches and 5 feet 4 inches, while Alex stands at 6 feet 4 inches tall, which disqualified him as a suspect. Prosecutors pointed to the gunshot evidence as indicating Alex's involvement. However, the expert witness, when questioned, acknowledged that other factors besides height could have influenced the trajectory of the bullets. The ballistics investigation determined that Maggie was shot with .300 blackout rounds from an AR-style rifle. Investigators found a box of these bullets on the Murdaugh family property. The state's attorney argued that Alex killed his wife and son to gain sympathy and avoid responsibility for his financial crimes. However, Alex's attorney disputed this theory, claiming that there was no reason for Alex to divert the financial investigation away from himself and instead put himself at the center of a murder investigation. During the trial, evidence emerged suggesting that Alex was not the one who directly committed the murders that the South Carolina Department of Law Enforcement, SLED, was investigating. Alex's attorney, Dick Harputlian, argued that he had an alibi for the night of the murders and had an motive to kill Maggie and their youngest son, Paul. He portrayed Alex and Maggie's marriage as one of everlasting love. However, prosecutors presented two videos of Alex from the night of the murders, taken hours apart. One was from Paul's Snapchat, and the other was from a law enforcement officer's body camera at the scene of the crime. The Snapchat footage was taken about an hour before the murders. When compared to what Alex was wearing after the incident, there was a clear discrepancy in clothing. In the Snapchat video, Alex was dressed in a blue shirt, which was different from the one he wore that was captured on the police body camera. Investigators concluded that they did not find the blue shirt they were looking for. Prosecutors believe Alex attempted to influence a key witness's testimony by asking if she remembered the shirt he was wearing the night of the incident. Alex's cell phone records showed that he was only at his mother's house for about 15 to 20 minutes. Alex's MOT. Hers caretaker also confirmed this, claiming that he only stayed for about 15 to 20 minutes before leaving. However, Alex claimed that he stayed for at least 45 minutes, and possibly as long as an hour and a half. When asked how long he stayed with his mother, Alex responded, about 15 to 20 minutes. 20 minutes at most. The most important piece of evidence was found on Paul's phone, which was recovered at the scene. It included a video that Paul had recorded at 8:44 p.m., just minutes before investigators believe the murder occurred. The video was recorded in a dog kennel and featured the audio of 3 separate voices. Family and friends identified the voices as those of Paul, Maggie, and Alex. This placed Alex in the vicinity of the murders, although he claimed he was never in the doghouse that night. During the 5th week of the trial, Alex took the stand and insisted that he never intended to harm his wife and son. He admitted that he had lied about his alibi, claiming that his was because he was addicted to opiates and prone to paranoia at the time. Prosecutors argued that after Alex killed his wife and son, he used his wife's phone to make several calls and send text messages to construct his alibi. Cell phone records also showed that Alex and his wife's phones locked within seconds of each other, which was presented to the jury as additional evidence. Based on data from Alex's cell phone, prosecutors noted that he engaged in a number of unusual activities during the timeframe of the murders. They claimed he attempted to conceal or destroy evidence that could link him to the case. However, Alex's attorneys countered this claim by pointing out that Alex's phone activity did not align with his wife's actions, arguing that it was impossible to conclude that he took his wife's phone after the shooting. Ultimately, the video recorded at the dog kennel provided decisive evidence that influenced the case outcome. The jury returned its verdict after 3 hours of deliberation on March 2, 2023. They found Alex guilty on all counts and sentenced him to 2 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. In addition, the jury also convicted him of 2 counts of using a weapon in a violent crime, which resulted in an additional 5 years in prison. Alex pleaded guilty to 22 counts of financial crimes as part of a deal but maintained his innocence regarding the murders of his wife and son. On March 9, 2023, he filed an appeal of his double murder conviction. During the trial, Alex's attorney filed a motion for a new trial after discovering evidence of jury tampering by Rebecca Hill, a Culleton County court clerk. Rebecca allegedly advised the jury not to believe Alex's testimony and the other evidence presented by the defense. She also allegedly pressured the jury to quickly return a guilty verdict and misrepresented key information to the judge. A hearing will be held for Alex's attorneys to present evidence and witnesses to support her claims. However, no judge has yet been selected to preside over the hearing. With Alex's appeal, more than 100 drug and financial crime charges, and multiple lawsuits pending, we can expect that more new information about Alex will be revealed in the future. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Valeria Vivano. Valeria Fern Vivano was born on May 29, 1996, in La Granja, a small commune near Santiago, Chile's capital. She was the youngest of 3 children in a modest family, with her parents Miguel and Jacqueline Vivano. She grew up with her older brother Michelangelo and sister Daniela. Her father worked for a transportation company, while her mother stayed at home to care for the children and create a warm family atmosphere. When Valeria started school, her parents decided to separate, which was a huge shock for her. Even though they continued to communicate after the divorce and her father is still very interested in his children's lives, including providing financial support, Valeria felt resentment towards him. They sometimes argued and went months without speaking, but they always managed to reconcile. Soon after the divorce, Miguel remarried, and Valeria gained 2 half-siblings. She maintained warm family relationships with them, as well as with her siblings, Daniela and Michelangelo. Jacqueline, on the other hand, never remarried. She focused on raising her children and later took care of her grandchildren. From a young age, Valeria showed a strong character, determination, and remarkable perseverance in everything she did. She excelled academically, participated in sports, and was always brave and fair, willing to help others, even when it put her at risk. She pursued a career in law enforcement because of her desire to help people in need and fight for justice. After finishing high school, Valeria enrolled in a police academy in Santiago, where she graduated with honors in 2016, becoming an investigator. At just 20 years old, she joined the Chilean police force. The following year, she started working in the bureau that investigates serious crimes in the capital. From the very beginning, Valeria demonstrated her commitment as a law enforcement officer and her passion for justice. She loved her job, carried out her responsibilities with care, and was always ready to respond to emergencies, even in the middle of the night. She would rush to crime scenes, pursue criminals, and sometimes had to provide emotional support to people who had lost loved ones. Her colleagues described Valeria as kind, cheerful, and friendly, while also recognizing her as a true professional and a dependable partner. Valeria served in the police force for nearly 5.5 years, during which she received numerous awards and recognition. She advanced in her career, gaining the respect of her colleagues and the admiration of her superiors. She also represented her department in Spain, spending about 2 weeks in Madrid on an official visit. She took great pride in being entrusted with such significant responsibilities. By 2020, she had been promoted to assistant inspector. In January 2020, Valeria welcomed a new member to her precinct, 21 years old Lionel Alejandro Contreras Canales, who had just graduated from the police academy. Valeria took on the role of his mentor as he started his first job. A few months later, they became partners and initially got along well. Lionel comes from a wealthy and powerful family, with an uncle who is a high-ranking official. Having grown up in comfort and always getting what he wanted, because of this, he became quite selfish and believed that everything should go his way. Valeria noticed her new colleague, Lionel, who repeatedly tried to get her attention and asked her out several times. Each time, she firmly rejected him. Valeria was serious about her job and believed that workplace romances were inappropriate. She viewed Lionel as immature, not because he was 3 years younger, but due to his childish behavior. Despite this, she hoped to help him grow up. In July 2020, Valeria and Lionel attempted to catch robbers who had stolen money from a store's cash register. The criminals remained at the scene and opened fire, leading to a shootout in which Lionel fatally shot both of them. While this situation could have been avoided, Lionel's response was considered appropriate for apprehending the suspects. Nonetheless, this incident put a strain on the relationship between Valeria and Lionel. Valeria's last birthday celebration was on May 29, 2021, when she turned 25. The event took place at her mother's house and was attended by many guests, including family, friends, and co-workers. However, Lionel was not invited. Valeria decided not to invite his, as he had recently tried to pursue her again, and she wanted to avoid any awkwardness. When Valeria attempted to discuss with him, he only reiterated his feelings for her, which she preferred to keep private from her colleagues. Despite the big turnout, presents, warm wishes, and heartfelt congratulations, Valeria appeared upset, even as she tried to smile. She had recently argued with her father and they hadn't spoken in days. Valeria had hoped her father would come to her birthday, but instead, he only sent a brief congratulatory message and didn't even call. Jacqueline, her mother, recognized her daughter's unhappiness and understood the cause of her sorrow. Frustrated with her ex-husband's behavior, she believed he would eventually reach out to Valeria and they would resolve their differences, as they had in the past. Tragically, Valeria and her father never had the opportunity to speak again. Just 2 weeks later, on June 13, 2021, Valeria lost her life while on duty. She was working the night shift, patrolling the streets and checking vehicles as part of a manhunt for a suspect in connection with a crime against a young woman that occurred yesterday on the outskirts of the capital. Authorities were on high alert for a white Kia, suspected to be driven by one of the criminals. The suspect likely had a weapon and may not have been alone in the vehicle. Valeria was in a patrol car with her partner, Lionel, and they were being driven by Deputy Commissioner Felipe Gilardo. They spotted the suspect's vehicle and decided to chase it without waiting for backup. The officers successfully blocked the suspect's escape. Lionel and Vivano got out of their car with their guns drawn, ordering the suspects to surrender and exit their vehicle with their hands raised. Suddenly, a single gunshot was heard, leaving everyone confused about who had fired and from where. Valeria, holding her side, collapsed onto the asphalt next to the police car. Reinforcements arrived at that moment, and Valeria's colleagues heard the gunshot and saw she was injured, but they didn't fully understand what had happened or who had shot her. Taking advantage of the chaos, the criminals quickly fled the scene while first aid was being given to the wounded officer. Despite the swift arrival of medics and the efforts of her colleagues to control the bleeding, Valeria could not be saved. She was rushed to the nearest hospital, where top specialists worked hard to save her life for several hours. Unfortunately, due to severe blood loss and damage to vital parts, she passed away on the operating table without regaining consciousness. When Valeria's family received the news, her parents, brothers, and sisters quickly went to the hospital. Unfortunately, by the time they arrived, had already passed away. Miguel was not only heartbroken but completely shattered, as he never had the chance to talk to and make amends with his dear daughter after their last small argument. He felt an overwhelming sense of guilt and was so distressed by the tragedy that he needed medical help to avoid a heart attack. Valeria was officially reported to have died while on duty during an operation aimed at capturing dangerous criminals. She was celebrated as a hero who sacrificed her life for the safety and well-being of others. Local media extensively covered the incident, with reporters highlighting her bravery and selflessness. The investigation into her death was conducted by experts from the Homicide and Major Crimes Division, where Valeria had previously served. They determined that she died from a gunshot wound to the abdomen, inflicted by an assailant in the direction of the suspect's vehicle that she and her colleagues were chasing. The situation initially seemed straightforward, as witnesses supported the narrative, making it appear that the case had been resolved. The only task left was to locate and hold the offenders accountable, who were still at large and possibly fleeing. Shortly after, the suspects were caught, attracting significant public attention. The criminals were identified as 19-year-old Miguel Alejandro Capon and his 17-year-old accomplice, whose name was kept confidential due to his age. Both individuals had prior convictions for lesser crimes. The then president of Chile, Miguel Juan Sebastián Pinera, issued an official statement assuring the public that the perpetrators would face justice according to the law. However, something felt off. After the autopsy and necessary examinations, Valeria's body was returned to her family, who gave her a respectful burial in one of the city's cemeteries. Hundreds attended the funeral to pay their respects and offer condolences to her family. Jacqueline and Miguel described the entire experience as a nightmare. Among those who carried Valeria's coffin was her colleague Lionel, who seemed to grieve more than anyone else. However, other colleagues noted there had recently been some tension between them, to the point that Valeria hadn't invited Lionel to her birthday party. Shortly after the funeral, court proceedings began for the suspects who had been arrested the day after the incident and were currently in custody. Everyone believes that the person responsible for Valeria's death has been caught, and proving their guilt seems simple, especially when they begin to give confessions. However, it soon became apparent that the investigation had serious flaws from the beginning. Important details were missed, and crucial forensic evidence was minimized. The process was mismanaged, and higher officials tried to hide the identity of the actual person responsible for Valeria's death. About a month and a half after Valeria's death, the case took an unexpected turn. By the end of July, 2 employees were suspended for their alleged involvement in the incident that led to Valeria's death. On August 1st, the parents of Valeria were summoned to the prosecutor's office in the capital for an important meeting. They believed this meant that new evidence had come to light, and that the detainees would finally face the punishment they deserved. Miguel and Jacqueline were devastated to hear that Valeria was killed by a bullet fired by a colleague. Prosecutor Juan Carlos Carrasco personally announced the news, expressing condolences and apologizing on behalf of the entire investigation team. Valeria's parents were in shock. They couldn't grasp how it could have occurred. The fatal shot that killed Valeria was fired from a gun by one of her colleagues. A ballistics examination conducted that day confirmed this, but the results were inaccurately reported. The bullet taken from the body Valeria was incorrectly categorized with different characteristics, such as shape, caliber, and weight. Additionally, the bullet had passed through the body rather than being extracted from it. There was a mix-up in the forensic reports regarding the entry and exit wounds. The bullet did not enter through the abdomen and exit through the back as stated. In fact, the shot was fired at her back. Several pages from the autopsy report were missing, and others had been obviously tampered with. Furthermore, the detainees involved in the trial, who supposedly admitted their guilt and were about to be sentenced, began to file complaints. They alleged that their confessions were obtained through torture and intimidation and that the firearm they had that night was not loaded. Valeria's story takes a sudden turn when she goes from a tragic hero who died on the job to a victim of betrayal, murdered by her own colleagues. In light of these new developments, the main suspects became Felipe Gilardo Era, the officer driving the police car, and Valeria's partner, Lionel Alejandro Contas Canales, who was in the back seat. Both were promptly suspended from their duties. On August 5th, it was revealed that the bullet that killed Valeria came from a service weapon. Later, an examination report showed that only Lionel had gunshot residue on his hands, making him the prime suspect. Interestingly, this information had not been disclosed earlier, as if it had been overlooked entirely. Several reports related to the ballistics examination and the pathologist's findings were mistakenly placed in an archive box, which was not properly reviewed. It remains unclear whether this was due to an accident, criminal negligence, or an intentional effort to hide important information. Now, the police officers involved in to capture the criminals that night are themselves regarded as suspects in the murder of Valeria. They, along with the previously arrested suspects, participated in a reenactment of the incident from that night. Felipe stated that from the driver's seat, he could only see Valeria, who was next to him in the front passenger seat and was the first to get out of the car. Lionel was sitting in the back and also exited, but the driver couldn't see his actions. Valeria had taken only a few steps when a shot rang out, she fell, and the suspect's car they were pursuing sped away. Lionel quickly ran to help Valeria. Lionel mentioned that he and Felipe exited the patrol car almost at the same time, but she had rushed forward as soon as the shot was fired. He firmly maintained that he did not shoot Valeria, and Felipe must witness and confirm this. He also confirmed that he was the first to reach Valeria and attempted to apply pressure to her wound. The testimonies from the witnesses varied, but the investigation revealed that Lionel was positioned behind Valeria at the time of the gunshot, and the bullet's path confirmed his location. Additionally, he was the only one with gunshot residue on his hands. New information from previously undisclosed reports and exam results led to potential motives for the crime. Lionel was arrested as the main suspect, while the previously detained young men were released with a non-exit agreement, since there were no charges against them. However, the reason for Lionel's actions is still uncertain. The primary theory was that the incident was a tragic accident. It is believed that Lionel, inexperienced officer, accidentally discharged his weapon while standing behind Valeria. In a state of panic, he tried to assist her, and when he returned his service weapon that day, he claimed he hadn't fired it. However, the truth soon emerged, and the young man's powerful relatives used their wealth and connections to try to cover up the incident. Because of that, the cleaned reports, missing documents, confusing evidence, and coerced testimonies from the detained individuals contributed. One theory, which Lionel himself partially confirmed, was that he was in love with Valeria and desperately wanted her attention. Unfortunately, his attempts only annoyed her, and she didn't even invite him to her birthday party, which the whole department attended. The shot in the back was his way of seeking revenge for this rejection. Another theory, suggested by Valeria's relatives, was that Valeria had uncovered something she shouldn't have, perhaps a corruption scheme or official misconduct. Being an honest and fair person, she would expose the culprit, leading to her being murdered to cover up the evidence. Young Lionel was chosen to carry out this act, with the promise that he would remain above suspicion. After Philippe was taken into custody, suspicions regarding Philippe remained. He was armed with the same type of service weapon, stood behind Valeria, and had the opportunity to fire the shot. Additionally, Philippe had a history of discipline for the unjustified use of a weapon during a criminal arrest, although no one was hurt in that incident. Because of this, he earned the nickname the Reckless Shooter. Lionel's defense team quickly adopted this theory, claiming that Philippe accidentally shot Valeria. Since both Philippe and Lionel carried identical service weapons, it was possible that the guns were mixed up or intentionally swapped. Additionally, Philippe was inconsistent in his testimony, changing it multiple times. He later said he couldn't accurately recall the incident of that night because everything happened so quickly. However, no gunpowder residue was found on his hands, suggesting he was innocent. In response, Lionel claimed that gunpowder got on his hands while he was applying pressure to Valeria's wound, and that Era, who also assisted she, might have washed his hands before the examination. This explanation was not credible, as Valeria's blood stains were still on Philippe's hands, and it is impossible to wash away gunpowder without also removing blood. The trial and verdict have raised concerns about the competence of the investigation team, leaving Valeria's parents feeling desperate in their quest for justice. The new developments in the case led to public outrage and diminished trust in law enforcement. This story garnered attention not just from Chilean media but also from international outlets. As a result, several high-ranking officials were suspended or lost their jobs, including the head of the Homicide Investigation Department. Following a further investigation, Lionel was identified as the sole suspect, with all others cleared and designated as witnesses. In the spring of 2022, he was officially charged and remained in custody until the trial concluded. The hearings for the case began in March of the following year, and based on the evidence and witness testimonies, Lionel's guilt was clearly established. At first, the prosecution charged Lionel with intentionally murdering Valeria and aimed for the harshest possible sentence. But Lionel maintained that he would never hurt Valeria because he loved her. However, the bullet that killed her came from his gun. Lionel Alejandro Contas Canales was convicted of manslaughter and received a 12-year prison sentence, with the possibility of parole after 8 years. After the verdict was announced, the Vivano family voiced their disappointment, believing the sentence was too light. Meanwhile, Lionel and his legal team quickly filed several appeals. In February 2024, Valeria's family received a shocking update when the Supreme Court unexpectedly reduced the punishment for Lionel to just 540 days in prison, starting from the day he was arrested. This meant he effectively walked out of the courtroom a free man. In response, Valeria Vivano's family intends to sue the Chilean government, alleging that the judges acted corruptly. In a statement, Valeria's mother expressed her heartbreak, stating that the original 12-year sentence had felt too lenient, but the new decision felt like a mockery. She mentioned that it was as if she had lost her daughter all over again and that she no longer had faith in justice. Furthermore, she emphasized that their family was determined to hold the negligent Chilean government for what had happened. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Laura Lopez. Laura Lopez was born on November 11, 2000, in Plata, Argentina. Her older sisters, Melissa and Demoris, who were 18 at the time of her birth, love her very much. Tragically, their mother passed away when Laura was just 3 years old, and her 3 sisters were taken care of by their father. Although he initially tried to support the family, he later fell into alcoholism a few years after. Despite the challenges she faced, Laura was known for her sweet and loving personality. Her sister affectionately called her Cello, a nickname that everyone who knew her called. Years later, when their father lost his job, the family needed to find additional work. At 18, Laura started selling fried pastries during the day while attending high school in the evening. In her free time, she focused on caring for her nieces and nephews. At the beginning of her studies, she hoped to secure a good job to improve her family's financial situation and bring them stability. Unfortunately, an unexpected incident occurred that hindered her plans. On September 12, 2019, Laura and Demoris spent the entire day enjoying tea together. Demoris had just completed renovations on her house, and Laura playfully remarked that Demoris had never made tea quite like that before. Regardless, it was a lovely day. Later, Laura went to school, where her classmates noticed something unusual about her behavior. She decided to sit at the back of the class instead of her usual seat and left shortly after 20 minutes, when the lesson ended. When Laura returned home around 11:30 p.m., a friend greeted her. They chatted, had a few drinks, and took selfies for social media. They said their goodbyes at 3 a.m. Laura expressed that she was feeling tired and to get some sleep. The next day, Melissa sent a message to Laura asking if she had seen a doctor for her ear problems. When Laura didn't respond, Melissa started to feel anxious. Worried about Laura's whereabouts, Melissa reached out to Demoris for information, which only heightened her concern. After hours of searching, Melissa and Demoris went to the police station for help. However, they were told they would have to wait 48 hours since Laura was last seen before they could file a missing person report. The officers thought Laura might have had a boyfriend, since it is common for teenagers to encounter situations like this. On Saturday the 14th, the police received a report, and they initiated a search, but unfortunately, it was too late. On Sunday the 15th, 2 fishermen working in the El River's breakwater area, just 15 kilometers from Laura's home, noticed something unusual. They remained calm until they discovered a young girl's body floating in the water, with limbs and a skull. They quickly contacted the authorities to report their find. When the officers arrived, they saw that the attack had been extremely violent, and it was clear that the attacker was skilled with knives. The detectives were actively looking for clues in the crime scene. They found a fabric bag, leggings, and underwear in the river, but they were completely destroyed. During their investigation, they also discovered 2 rings and, after searching the riverbed, found a knife stained with blood. The officers contacted Laura's family, and when Demoris arrived at the location, she quickly identified the clothing as Laura's belongings. Fishermen had found Laura's limbs and skull in shallow waters downstream from the initial discovery, which was then handed over to the forensic team for examination. Dr. Carlos Gordillo conducted the autopsy and determined that the death was caused by a severe blow to the head, which led to internal bleeding and increased pressure in the brain. A blow to the back of the head left her unconscious. Laura suffered between 2 and 4 hours of intense pain. Additionally, bruises were found on her arms, indicating that she had been beaten and had fought against her attacker. And the presence of intimate injuries on her body was a clear indication of sexual assault. Dr. Carlos Gordillo also mentioned that there were cuts on her neck, arms, and legs, suggesting that the attacker might have used kitchen knives. After 3 a.m. on Friday, they analyzed Laura's cell phone. Her last contact was with a 28-year-old mechanic named Alfredo Emilio Escobar. He and Laura had been high school classmates, and he enjoyed hunting and fishing, which meant he was skilled with a knife. His house was 2.5 kilometers, 20 blocks, from Laura's home, making it easy for him to visit. The cell tower signals were strong, and on September 13th, Alfredo contacted Laura 4 times. At that time, the cell towers showed they were both at home. Soon after, both phones were active near Laura's house. Laura's phone traveled to the city center and arrived at Alfredo's residence by 5 a.m. Laura's WhatsApp story featured an alien emoji, and her phone was still being tracked. Alfredo was found at his home at 5:52 a.m. After this time, Laura's phone stopped working, and there was no further communication from her. Records show that Alfredo didn't use his cell phone again until 11:05 p.m. the following day. Alfredo returned home at 12:05 p.m. on September 15th, caught by 13 cameras, including city and private surveillance. Investigations on local stores revealed recordings from the early morning of September 13th, showing their physical characteristics resemble Laura and Alfredo. Laura's then mobile phone was moving, and Alfredo was undoubtedly the only suspect in this case. During the investigation, one of the agents recognized Alfredo, recalling a meeting with him a year ago on Highway 22 while traveling to meet family in the towns of Nguyen and Plotier. At that time, a young man had crashed into a patrol car while driving over 80 kilometers per hour. He refused arrest, leading to a lawsuit. Alfredo was about to go to court for that incident, but now he faces more serious charges. At 8:30 a.m. on September 17th, a police patrol was stationed about 30 meters from Alfredo's residence. While on duty, they noticed a young man resembling he driving away from a Fiat Ducato minibus they had been watching. The police identified him by his face shape, facial features, and hairstyle. He entered a house and later left with 2 adults approximately 60 years old. The 3 of them got into a vehicle and headed towards Highway 22 without drawing attention. The police pursued the vehicle until it stopped in a remote area, around 30 meters from a bridge connecting Nguyen and Saletti. The elderly man and Alfredo got out of the vehicle at the same time, and the police asked for their identification. He was with his father and another man, while his mother stayed in the car. It was clear they were trying to leave the city. Alfredo agreed to the identification process but appeared nervous. Soon after, he was taken to the police station and his car was impounded. He underwent a medical examination, which revealed swollen areas on his right knuckles, indicating he had used them to punch. He also had cuts and bruises on the palm of his right hand. Laura's death happened the same day these were found. As a result, Alfredo was charged with raping and murdering Laura. Despite a request to remain silent, he was detained for 6 months over concerns he might escape or obstruct the investigation. On September 1st, a search warrant was executed at the Estrada Street residence where the Alfredo family lived. The property was large, with a construction site and 2 buildings at the back. In Alfredo's sleeping area, officers found fingerprints on the walls. Using luminol to test them revealed blood stains. A blood-stained cloth was also found during the search. The situation escalated when officers went to the building behind the residence and found blood spots on the crumpled vegetation. Blood was also detected on the gates, the right handle of a cart, and at one end of an infrared emitting device. This location was where the fatal blow that killed Laura occurred. The search team collected blood samples for comparison and found that both Laura's and Alfredo's blood were present. The fluid found on Laura's body was examined through DNA analysis. Alfredo's lawyer said the rape charges should not have been brought before the test results were available. However, the results were released shortly. The Ministry of Health Central Laboratory analyzed the samples collected during the investigation. The genetic profiles of both Laura and Alfredo were compared. At the time of his arrest, Alfredo was wearing sneakers, and a knife was found at the bottom of the river. Both were tested. DNA matching Laura's was found on both items. Her genital area was examined using 3 swabs, and Alfredo's DNA matched one of them. This evidence allowed investigators to confirm that he had sexually assaulted Laura. She was killed, dismembered, and her body was disposed of. Law enforcement officials confirmed this during a press conference on September 21st. The prosecutor Juan Austin Garcia believed Alfredo Emilio Escobar was guilty of the crime. He accused Alfredo of killing Laura to cover up the rape and said that if found guilty, Alfredo could be prosecuted and face life in prison. Despite this, more evidence was still needed. DNA analysis technology played an important role in discovering that Alfredo was the suspect. Although he did not plead guilty, the court ordered the seizure of his mobile phone and required him to provide the access code. Despite having Laura as one of his contacts, it was discovered that he had deleted her from the conversation the night she disappeared. He erased Laura's call history, but their social security numbers are still not deleted. Media interviews revealed Alfredo's actions on September 11th, 12th, and 13th. During the investigation, he visited social media platforms to look at photos shared by Laura. Although Alfredo claimed to be innocent, the evidence suggested he was responsible for the murder. Finally, conclusions have been drawn about the incident that took place on the night of the crime. On September 12, 2019, Laura left school around 8 p.m. After spending time with a friend, she mentioned feeling tired and intended to go to sleep. Despite this, Alfredo contacted her at 3:40 a.m. and they began a conversation. Although they were not friends, she agreed to meet him, and then she went to his house. The incident inside the house are unclear, but research shows that Laura avoided any personal contact with Alfredo. In a fit of anger, he sexually assaulted her. Because he was afraid she would denounce him to the authorities, he murdered her. Alfredo led Laura to the backyard, hitting her on the head twice. At that point, she was still alive, but he cruelly hid her body for several hours to avoid getting caught. He also turned off his phone. Laura's body remained in the shed for almost a day, and she died from her injuries. Alfredo used a sharp knife from his kitchen to dismember her body. He then packed the body her parts into his Fiat Ducato minibus and drove 15 kilometers to the area near the breakwaters and left her body there. Afterward, he returned and turned on his phone. Feel relieved that everything has been settled. This case attracted the attention of the whole city. Alfredo's 23-year-old sister made the most headlines when she posted a message on her personal page mentioning both her brother and the victim, Laura. The post received mixed reactions. Some people sympathized with her, while others accused her of being complicit. The younger sister Alfredo's asked Cello and her team to remain vigilant, as her family is involved. Melissa later contacted Alfredo's sister to thank her for the message and asked for clarification. The criminal case was immediately initiated by the prosecution. The initial court hearings were held at the Provincial Legislative Assembly. According to the prosecutor of Nucan, Alfredo was entirely responsible for his actions, and Laura's death was attributed to gender-based violence, in addition to other charges such as rape. In the same hearing, the experts who were involved in analyzing the clothing found in the case, the river, along with the remains and evidence discovered at Alfredo's house, provided their testimony. Florencia, Laura's closest friend, was an unexpected witness. She explained that Alfredo had been messaging Laura for months, inviting her to meet for drinks and socializing. However, they had never met before. Florencia had known Alfredo for 5 years and was aware of his bad reputation. His house frequently hosted parties filled with alcohol and drugs, and intimate acts shared publicly by couples. Florencia had repeatedly advised Laura not to get involved with him, but she consistently ignored. The defense asked why Florencia had not suggested Laura blocking Alfredo's number. Florencia responded that Laura had made that decision and she did not want to interfere in Laura's life. While Florencia was on the stand, a video from security cameras from the day Laura disappeared was shown. In the footage from around 4 a.m., two people can be seen on opposite sides of the screen, heading towards the city center. Florencia admits that it was Laura, stating that her sneakers, jacket, and manner of walking were unmistakable. She also recognized Alfredo. The testimony of Alfredo's friend revealed his impulsiveness when the judge accused him of infidelity. His behavior was characterized by substance abuse and womanizing tendencies. Alfredo's ex-partner, also present in court, stated that their relationship ended badly years ago. She reported him to the authorities because she believed he had stolen from her house and taken money. When she met him to ask for the money back, he chased after the friend who accompanied her. After reviewing the testimonies, Alfredo tried to defend himself. He claimed that his friend, who sold him illegal drugs, was the real culprit. He said that he had been unconscious during the incident that night. He told the local media that he did not commit murder. He explained that he was intoxicated that night, and his friend was also under the influence of drugs at his residence with Laura. When he heard a scream from one of the rooms, Alfredo went to check it out. Seeing blood, he cleaned it up and helped his friend hide the body. In the end, the truth is what truly matters. Despite the lack of evidence, the statement was not confirmed. Alfredo was the only suspect. In his speech, the prosecutor stated that Alfredo took advantage of betraying Laura's trust due to his familiarity with her. He was responsible for the cruelty of his actions and the gruesome method of disposing of the remains. Alfredo Emilio Alfredo was convicted of the rape and murder of 18-year-old Laura Lopez after a jury deliberated for just 40 minutes. This charge is made more serious because it involved an attempt to conceal the attack. The issue of gender violence played a role in the case, leading to him receiving a life sentence without the possibility of release. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Inman family. William Inman and Sandra's story began in 1983 when they met at church. He was 18 and she was 16. With their parents' approval, they quickly got married and moved to Logan, Ohio. William was a devoted religious man who worked as a builder. In his free time, he volunteered at the Evangelical Church of the Tabernacle of Faith near Nelson Villa, where he played musical instruments. Meanwhile, Sandra, as a housewife, supported her husband's spiritual activities. In 1984, the couple had their first child, a son named William Jr. To prevent any confusion, the church community referred to the father as Bill and the son as Will. Over the years, Will grew up. In 2001, at the age of 17, he met 15-year-old Summer Cook at a church service. Their meeting was strikingly similar to the love story of Bill and Sandra. The young couple dated for 3 years, and in 2004, after Summer turned 18, they got married. They quickly settled into Will's parents' large house in Logan. In the same year, 39-year-old Bill Inman declared himself a spiritual leader and turned his garage into a temporary church, where he started holding services. Although local residents were initially skeptical of him as a self-proclaimed pastor, his church began to gather followers. It started with neighbors and gradually expanded to their acquaintances. People were drawn there to pray, seek comfort, and make donations. In 2005, Will and Summer joyfully welcomed a son named Alex. However, they soon encountered financial challenges. Will's work at the church did not provide enough income, so the family chose to seek better opportunities in another state. In 2006, the Inman family relocated to Florida. They soon found jobs in the construction industry, building hotels in their new location. Meanwhile, Sandra and Summer looked after their home and raised little Alex. After 2 years, however, they missed their hometown and decided to return to Ohio. Unfortunately, they had lost the right to repurchase their previous house in Logan while they were away, so they had to rent a different place in rural Vinton. In 2008, shortly after returning, Will and Summer welcomed their second child, a daughter named Kale. 2 years later, they had their third child, another daughter named Alana. Despite the difficulties of raising young children, Will and Summer made an effort to carve out time for themselves. Almost every weekend, they entrusted their kids to Bill and Sandra, who happily embraced their roles as grandparents. For this elderly couple, their grandchildren brought immense joy and purpose to their lives. In the spring of 2010, Bill Inman was officially appointed as a pastor of the Church of the Tabernacle of Faith. Alongside his wife, he established a charitable organization named Ranch of Mercy, which was created to assist those in need, particularly people who had lost their jobs or homes. Bill had a vision of constructing a large shelter for orphans and widows, intending to build it himself. Unfortunately, he faced challenges due to insufficient funding to make this dream a reality. Bill proposed holding a lottery to raise funds. He planned to sell tickets for $10 each to reach his financial goal. The winner will receive either a new house or $200,000. Bill also promised to give away 99 other valuable prizes in a raffle. Information about the lottery was shared through local media and advertising. Bill went door to door, encouraging people to support the cause by buying tickets, assuring them that the money raised would be used to build a shelter for those in need. In total, Inman sold 100,000 tickets and raised $1 million. The prize draw is set for September 2010. While Bill was busy with charity work, issues were developing in the Inman family. In June 2010, Summer informed her husband that she wanted a divorce after 6 years of marriage. Before this conversation, she had written a painful entry in her diary, expressing that she was very tired of trying to please everyone and felt exhausted. She questioned whether she deserved happiness and if she had the right to fall in love again and feel loved in return. She acknowledged that it might not be the best time, but she felt the need to tell Will the truth, believing he deserved to know that she did not want to be with him anymore. She mentioned that she needed time alone to figure out who she really was, as she felt like she was just following orders at that moment. Summer emphasized her love for her children, stating that she wouldn't trade them for the world, but she did not want them to see their mother merely obeying someone else. She expressed uncertainty about how Will would react, fearing that he might get angry, try to take the kids, or even threaten her. She believed they should share equal time with the children, but she knew his parents would oppose this and try to persuade her to stay, although she realized that wouldn't change anything. She also recounted that yesterday, Will had asked her what she wanted, but she couldn't answer because all she knew was what she didn't want, to be unhappy and feel trapped. Yet, she remained silent every day, saying that all she could do was cry and sleep. She admitted that she just didn't know how to escape the situation and make everything right, hoping that when she wrote again, she would have found the answer. Summer filed for divorce and moved out of the Inman's house with the children and essential belongings to her parents' home. She wanted to ensure that Alex, Kale, and Alana could still communicate with their father, so she allowed them to visit Will and his parents. 2 months after leaving her husband, Summer began a relationship with Adam Peters. At the same time, she took a job as a cleaner at a bank in downtown Logan, as she had no formal education and struggled to find other employment. Meanwhile, September and October passed, but the drawing that Bill from Ranch of Mercy had promised never took place. It also became clear that construction on the prize house hadn't even started, and the Bill family was slow to refund people's money for the tickets. In early December 2010, the Inmans received notice that they needed to leave their rented home due to unpaid debts. After this news, Summer, accompanied by Adam, went to collect their belongings. However, Will and his parents refused to let her in. Summer called the police, claiming that Will was threatening her and wouldn't return her personal items. When officers arrived, Will continued to deny entry. He threatened to shoot Adam and even got into a confrontation with a police officer. In her statement, Summer explained that before their wedding, she and Will appeared to have a perfect relationship, but everything changed after they married. Will became controlling and jealous, making unfounded accusations. He dictated her actions and invaded her privacy, affecting her eating habits, household responsibilities, and even their sexual relationship. Summer was so restricted that she couldn't sleep without his permission. He essentially kept her confined to the house and took away her phone and keys. She revealed that Will had always wanted to have 12 children with her and had even considered marrying a second wife. He frequently visited websites for polygamous families, where he shared explicit photos. Will also threatened to kill Summer if she tried to leave him. At one point, he took her cherished cats, drove them far away, and then lied, saying they had escaped through an open window, laughing and claiming she would never see them again. After Summer accused him of wrongdoing, Will attempted to defend his actions by saying he took her phone and keys because he thought she was being unfaithful. Regarding the cats, he claimed he took them to a shelter because they were scratching the furniture and being aggressive to family members. Eventually, Will was ordered to stay away from Summer, and he received a fine and probation for his actions. A custody battle began between the two families. The Inmans reported to the police that Adam Peters posed a danger to Alex, Kaylee, and Alana. A frightening incident occurred late on the night of March 22, 2011. 25-year-old Summer was finishing her shift at the bank. As usual, she cleaned up her workspace and went outside around 11 p.m. to take out the trash. Before leaving, Summer had sent a message to Adam, whom she was supposed to meet after work, but he never saw her again. Concerned, Adam went to the bank after midnight. He couldn't find Summer, but near the trash can he discovered her belongings, her phone, keys, and a running music player with headphones on. A little further away, he found her jacket in the bushes. Adam called the police and notified Summer's parents about her disappearance. Initially, the family thought that she might have been late from work or misplaced her belongings. However, the bank security service informed them that she hadn't been seen since her shift ended. When the police arrived, several witnesses were already present. Two women jogging nearby reported that they had seen Summer being kidnapped about an hour earlier. They explained that as Summer approached a dumpster, a Ford Crown Victoria, driven by a blonde woman, pulled up. Two men wearing black balaclavas exited the vehicle, grabbed Summer, and forced her into the back seat. Despite her attempts to resist, scream, and plead for help, one of the witnesses who tried to intervene was met with pepper spray from the female driver. The kidnappers then drove away with Summer. The two women rushed to the nearest police station to report the incident, but for some reason, law enforcement was skeptical and even suspicious of their account, suspecting they might have fabricated the story for amusement. A whole hour had passed after Summer's parents called the police before they finally arrived at the crime scene. Unfortunately, by that time, it was too late for them to find Summer while the trail was still fresh. News of the abduction of 25-year-old Summer Inman quickly spread through local media. Hundreds of residents of Logan joined the search effort, but as days went by, hope of finding her alive began to fade. Summer's parents struggled to keep their thoughts away from the worst possible outcome. A few weeks prior to the tragedy, Summer had posted a picture on Facebook with Adam and the children, depicting what appeared to be a happy family. This photo infuriated Will Inman, Summer's husband. It had been revealed that Summer met Adam before deciding to divorce Will. In the spring of 2010, Adam started working for the Inmans, maintaining their house and yard, and he soon developed feelings for Summer. Initially, she rejected his advances, but eventually, she gave in. In her diary, she reflected on that moment, expressing that when their eyes met, she realized she had let the devil take hold of her and ignored the warnings from God. She mentioned that she tried to walk away, with her mind screaming to run, but she stayed and allowed Adam to embrace her, expressing her regret and guilt. Meeting Adam marked the beginning of the end for Summer and Will's marriage, as she realized that she wanted to pursue happiness, love, and to be loved, which ultimately led her to file for divorce. 5 days before Summer disappeared, Will attempted to challenge the alimony payments in court. He wanted to reduce the amount he had to pay his ex-wife from $150 per child each month to $50, as his annual income was only $6,500. Will, along with his parents, sought sole custody of the children, but the judge denied their request. Bill and Sandra deeply missed their grandchildren, who were the center of their lives. Since separating from Summer, the elderly couple had visibly lost weight and appeared weary. In March 2011, shortly after Summer went missing, the police found the Inman family, Bill, Sandra, and Will, were hiding in Bill's mother's house in Jackson County, Ohio. During questioning, all three of them consistently denied any involvement in Summer's disappearance. They explained that on the night she vanished, they had traveled to Cleveland to look at a new house. However, their car broke down, and they spent the entire night trying to fix it on the side of the road. They returned home to Logan the following morning. The Inmans stated that they had always treated Summer well and rarely had conflicts with her. However, they noted that after Adam Peters came into their lives, things took a turn for the worse. Bill, Sandra, and Will described Adam as a negative influence who had ruined their previously happy family. The police took an interest in a white Ford Crown Victoria that was parked near the Inman's house. They seized the car's GPS navigator and examined its route. They discovered that on the afternoon of March 22, when the kidnapping took place, the car was in Logan. The GPS was turned off at 5:30 p.m. that evening and only activated again the following morning, March 23, still in Logan. There was no evidence that the Inman family ever came to Cleveland. Additionally, phone records indicated that the suspects remained in Logan throughout the night from March 22 to March 23. On the morning of March 23 at 7:30 a.m., Bill, Sandra, and Will were seen at a car wash, where they had the car thoroughly cleaned inside. Summer was not with them. Afterward, the Inmans traveled to Cleveland, where they changed the tires at an auto repair shop. The mechanic found it unusual that Bill chose to replace nearly new tires with older ones. Additionally, the Inmans attempted to alter the car's appearance, and Bill removed a spotlight that he had previously installed near the side mirror. After the arrest, Bill attempted to reassure his elderly mother that they were innocent and that the trials they faced were a form of divine punishment. However, after several hours of intense questioning and realizing that all three could face the death penalty, Sandra eventually broke down. She confessed that they were responsible for the kidnapping of Summer on that tragic night. The men wearing balaclavas were identified as her husband, Bill, and her son, Will. Sandra explained that the abduction was entirely her idea. She intended to scare her daughter-in-law into allowing Will to see their children, but things quickly spiraled out of control. She stated that Will would admit to guilt for both murder and kidnapping. Sandra acknowledged that it was her idea to take Summer, explaining that she believed this would frighten her. Will tied Summer's hands, feet, and neck with plastic ties. Summer struggled and screamed, but then suddenly lost consciousness. Upon noticing that she was unresponsive, Will panicked and wanted to cut her free. He called out to his mother, asking where the knife was because he couldn't find it. As the family desperately searched for the knife, precious minutes passed. It was too late, and Summer had suffocated. Sandra insisted that they never intended to harm their daughter-in-law. Their goal was simply to scare her in order to resolve a custody dispute over the grandchildren so they could see them on weekends. On March 29, 2011, 1 week after the abduction, Sandra revealed the location where they had hidden the body. Summer was placed in an abandoned well on the property of the church that the Inman family attended, known as the Church of the Tabernacle of Faith, which is situated near Nelsonville, 30 kilometers from the bank where Summer worked. Bill Inman had previously helped build this church, and 28 years ago, he and Sandra got married there under its arches. When the police removed the concrete lid from the well, they discovered a disturbing scene. Summer was at the bottom, her body positioned head first. She was dressed in the same outfit she had worn on her last day, a black t-shirt that read, "I don't have an anger problem, I have an idiot problem." The autopsy revealed that Summer had died from strangulation. Besides the marks left by plastic ties on her neck, wrists, and ankles, there were no other injuries on her body. Sandra originally intended to dispose of the body in the river. However, she later thought the church well would be a safer place where it wouldn't be discovered. She confessed to her crime and showed genuine remorse for her actions. The trial soon followed. Bill, 49, and Will, 28, both pleaded not guilty to Summer's murder. Throughout the hearings, they spoke very little and avoided making eye contact with her parents. In contrast, Sandra took full responsibility for the crime, reiterating that the abduction was her idea. As she delivered her final statement, the woman tearfully pleaded for forgiveness from Summer's parents. Overwhelmed with emotion, Sandra clearly expressed her deep regret for the tragic events. "Summer was like a daughter to me," she cried. "If I could turn back time, I would never have made this terrible choice." In 2012, the court sentenced Bill and Will Inman to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Sandra received a life sentence but is eligible for parole after 15 years. The church friends and parishioners all agreed that Bill was the one controlling everything in the Inman family. He made all the decisions. No one thought that the idea of the kidnapping came from Sandra. It was well known that Will had been spoiled as a child, with his parents giving in to his every demand. Sandra realized that both her husband and son were as guilty as she was, but she continued to plead guilty, hoping that it would lessen the consequences for them. Alex, Cale, and Alana were cared for by the parents of Summer, who had passed away, for an extended period. They struggled to explain to their grandchildren the absence of their mother, father, grandmother, and grandfather. The tragic story of the Inman family highlights how concealed anger, jealousy, and a need to control others can result in devastating outcomes. Bill and Sandra, who appeared to embody piety and strong family values to everyone, revealed themselves to be oppressive figures to their daughter-in-law. Summer found herself trapped in a toxic relationship that stifled her will and desires. Her efforts to escape ultimately cost her life. Will, who was raised in this oppressive environment, became selfish and resistant to compromise. His obsession with reclaiming his wife and children at any price ultimately led to his downfall. The terrible crime committed by the Inman's family shattered multiple families, leaving 3 young children without their mother and a grandfather and grandmother without their beloved family member. This story highlights the importance of letting go of grudges, respecting others' boundaries, and building relationships based on trust and respect. Holding on to anger can eventually lead to outbursts that damage the most valuable aspects of our lives. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Emily Longley. Emily Longley was born in England in 1994 to parents Mark and Caroline Longley. 2 years later, she welcomed her younger sister, Hannah. The sisters enjoyed a close relationship while growing up in a loving family. When Emily was 9 and Hannah was 7, the family relocated to Auckland, New Zealand. Unfortunately, after Emily began associating with the wrong crowd, her parents chose to send her back to the UK to live with her grandparents and start anew. In 2010, Emily traveled to England to study at Brockenhurst College. Her goal was to earn a business degree, and she aspired to be a model. While in England, she stayed at her grandparents' house in Bournemouth, a popular resort town located on the coast of the English Channel, near Poole. At the time of her move, Emily's sister Hannah was still in school. Their parents, Mark and Caroline, had divorced but continued to have a friendly relationship. Emily was a beautiful young woman who drew a lot of attention. One day, she met 20-year-old Elliot Turner, and he left a lasting impression on her. Over time, their communication developed into a romantic relationship. In April 2011, Emily traveled back to New Zealand to visit her family, whom she hadn't seen in 6 months. Her father greeted her at the airport, and she rushed to him, hugging him tightly and expressing how much she missed him. Emily shared that she had a very close bond with her father, who adored her and missed her smile, laughter, and playful jokes. The next day, the entire family visited Emily's favorite pizzeria. She shared with her parents that, in addition to her college studies, she was involved in modeling and had made some amazing friends. She also talked about her boyfriend, 20-year-old Elliot. Although they had only been dating for a few months, Emily felt she was too young for a serious relationship. "I think I'm going to break up with him when I return," she said. Over the following weeks, Emily enjoyed spending time with friends and family, creating great memories. No one realized that they would soon lose her. When Emily's flight began boarding, she found it difficult to say goodbye to her family. She promised them she would return in 5 months. During that time, she was excited to watch the Rugby World Cup starting on September 9th. A few days later, while texting her father, Emily mentioned that she had broken up with Elliot, but she chose not to share specific details. Elliot had been acting oddly after seeing photos Emily posted on social media from New Zealand, particularly because there were other guys in the pictures, which made him very jealous. Elliot Turner, a 20-year-old from a wealthy jewelry family, appeared to live a carefree life. He was well known in the bar and club scenes of Bournemouth and Poole and was part of a group of affluent young men known as the Firm. His friends nicknamed him All Talk Turner due to his tendency to brag. In December 2010, he met Emily, and they enjoyed a lavish lifestyle together, often staying out late. However, Elliot, who had a history of being obsessed with women, quickly became jealous, leading to frequent violent arguments in their relationship. People described him as threatening, aggressive, controlling, and possessive. In January 2008, when Elliot was 16 years old, the police sent him a warning letter about harassment. They advised him not to contact his ex-girlfriend after he inundated her with text messages and emails following their breakup. Elliot enjoyed being the center of attention and did not have to work since his parents financially supported him. He was skilled at manipulating others, including his parents, and his life centered on parties, women, alcohol, and drugs. He believed he was capable of doing anything he desired. Elliot always carries a hammer with him to intimidate anyone who might challenge him. His friends thought Elliot fancied himself a gangster. Elliot would often buy drinks for everyone at the bar. Elliot liked to brag about owning a new Mini Cooper, but it was actually a gift from his grandmother. He attempted to maintain his tough guy persona by posting streetwise messages on social media, where he often called himself Scarface or God. Although he attracted a lot of female attention, he became very attached to Emily when he met her. She praised his image as a successful person, something he worked hard to achieve. As their relationship progressed, Elliot began to display increasingly controlling behavior. He even threatened Emily, saying he would take her life. Emily wrote an emotional note to Elliot expressing her feelings. 1. I love you. 2. Please don't say you'll kill me. 3. Stop bringing up your ex-girlfriends. 4. Stop being so aggressive. Relax a bit, because that is much more attractive, and you scare me because you're so intimidating. As Elliot revealed his true nature and his controlling behavior escalated to an unacceptable level, Emily understood that he was not the right person for her. Then she decided to break up with him. Unfortunately, individuals like Elliot often cannot accept rejection. On the evening of May 6th, 2011, Emily was out with friends at an entertainment venue. Surveillance footage showed her arriving at the nightclub with them. In another development, Elliot checked Emily's Facebook messages and found out she was seeing another man, which made him extremely angry. He went to the club and confronted Emily, leading to an argument. The situation escalated when Emily threw her drink at him. Elliot reacted by verbally abusing her and making threats of violence. He disapproved of Emily's outfit, claiming it was too revealing, and ignored the fact that they had broken up. Unwilling to accept the breakup, he continued to follow her after she decided to leave. His friends heard him say that he would kill her, that he would go to prison for it and still be a millionaire, and that serving 10 years in prison wouldn't bother him. Elliot convinced Emily to come to his house, saying he wanted to talk more relaxed. Elliot lived with his parents, which may have made Emily feel more at ease, thinking he would behave better around them. Neighbors observed them entering the house. The next morning, Anita Turner, Elliot's mother, called emergency services, reporting that Emily was unresponsive. The ambulance arrived around 9 a.m. Anita followed the nurse's instructions to help Emily, but unfortunately, when the paramedics arrived, they could only confirm Emily Longley had died. Anita, an Indonesian citizen, moved to the UK to marry Lee Turner. When they had a son, they gave him everything he wanted, which turned out to be a serious mistake. During a call with emergency services, Anita seemed surprisingly calm for a mother who had just discovered her son's girlfriend dead. Her demeanor was unsettlingly normal. Meanwhile, in New Zealand, Emily's father, Mark, woke up at 2 a.m. to find numerous missed calls from his ex-wife Caroline and their younger daughter Hannah. He also had a voicemail from Hannah, but she was talking something that difficult to understand. Then he heard Caroline screaming in the background, saying, "Emily is dead." Mark was in disbelief. He immediately called his mother in England. When she answered, his world shattered. She was crying uncontrollably. Soon after, a police officer took the phone and said, "I'm sorry to inform you that your daughter Emily is dead." Mark was stunned. Just a week ago, Emily had been on his couch, smiling. As he flew to the UK, the grieving father struggled to accept that his daughter was truly gone. Sadly, it was no dream. The loss of their eldest daughter was an immense heartbreak for Emily's parents. The police informed them that Emily had passed away in her sleep, which didn't make sense to them since she was so young and healthy. While the police gathered some evidence, the circumstances surrounding Emily's death remained unclear, and they would have to wait for the autopsy results. Elliot Turner's parents, Anita and Lee, told investigators that they had been at home all night and had not heard anything unusual. Meanwhile, Elliot shared his sorrow for Emily on social media by posting photos of them together. The police found no solid evidence to contradict the Turners' claim that Emily had mysteriously died in her sleep. In any death investigation, the crucial task is to determine the cause of death. Identifying the cause helps investigators understand the situation and how to approach the investigation. While they awaited the autopsy results, investigators discovered that a few days before her death, Emily had posted a concerning message on her Facebook page, stating that she had a stalker. Emily detailed in phone calls she received, saying that someone had called her, and when she had asked who it was, they replied that she didn't know them, but they knew everything about her. She had asked how they got her number, and they said they would tell her when they saw her, while persistently asking her out. Emily had hung up, but they kept calling. She made this post on Thursday, May 5th. The police discovered that before her death, Emily had a heated argument with Elliot in front of other patrons at the nightclub. Interrogation with Elliot's friends revealed that he attempted to control Emily's actions and had learned about her meeting with another man. Most alarmingly, they mentioned that Elliot had threatened her life multiple times. However, his friends dismissed these threats, believing they were merely bravado to enhance his gangster image. The autopsy did not determine a definitive cause of death, but experts suggested that strangulation might have occurred, noting that the physical evidence was consistent with pressure applied to the neck. The investigators suspected that a member of the Turner family might be involved in Emily's death, which prompted them to install listening devices in their home. The police aimed to uncover any hidden information, and their suspicions were confirmed. One recording revealed that Elliot was advising his mother on how to interact with the police and what she should say. Lee Turner, Elliot's father, seemed to be the only one aware of the wrongdoing in their actions, but he eventually succumbed to the demands of his son and wife. While reviewing the recordings, investigators discovered details about Emily Longley's death. Elliot Turner confessed to causing her death, leading to his arrest a week later. Although he denied his guilt, his lawyers attempted to dispute the validity of the audio recordings. After thoroughly examining the case, the judge permitted the prosecution to present the recordings as evidence. Unaware that the police were listening, Elliot revealed that he felt angry every day and that Emily had upset him more than anyone else ever had. During the trial in May 2012, Elliot's lawyer argued that he acted in self-defense. Turner explained that a fight in his bedroom escalated, leading him to grab Emily by the neck. He insisted that he did not strangle her and claimed he discovered her dead in his bed the next morning. On the second day of the trial, Elliot expressed his disgust with his actions that night. It was reported that after finding Emily dead, he wrote a letter to his mother expressing his shame and mentioning that he was planning to leave for Spain. This suggests that Elliot intended to leave the country on the day Emily died but ultimately changed his mind for some unknown reason. When the police arrived at his house after receiving a call, they found packed bags, and Elliot had his passport in his pocket. In court, he admitted that he had threatened Emily and felt upset and deceived the night before her death after seeing emails on her phone. He claimed he had forcefully pushed her face into a table and recounted the fight they had before her death, stating that Emily began hitting him with her hands and feet. He attempted to calm her down but eventually gave up. When asked if he planned to kill Emily, Elliot said no. He claimed he thought Emily was asleep and only realized she was dead when she didn't wake up the next morning. In an interview with the Herald newspaper, Emily's father, Mark, expressed the pain of losing his daughter. The reality of death is that it's incredibly difficult. It doesn't matter if it's your child, partner, or even your 99-year-old grandmother. It's painful when someone is here one day and gone the next. This is something we struggle to cope with. All anniversaries are tough, birthdays are tough, Christmas is tough, and Easter is especially hard because that was the last time I truly spent time with her, Mark Longley shared. He shared that the hardest part is knowing he will never see the woman she could have been. I miss watching the life she was denied develop. We had a small but beautiful glimpse of the woman she was becoming, and I felt so proud of her. As her father, I'm naturally biased, but the world truly was a better and more enjoyable place with her in it. During the trial, Elliot Turner was depicted as a privileged young man whose parents tried to protect him from facing consequences. The court revealed that he had free access to his family's home in the wealthy Queen's Park neighborhood of Bournemouth. There, he hosted wild parties for his middle-class friends, as described by his father, Lee. To ensure he didn't bother them, his parents allowed him to use a converted garage as his own living space, giving him the freedom to come and go as he pleased. It was in this room, equipped with a mini bar, that he strangled Emily while they were on his bed. The jury quickly dispelled any illusions Elliot had when they found him guilty on May 22, 2012. The court sentenced him to life in prison, with a minimum term of 16 years. While delivering the verdict, Mrs. Justice Dost described Elliot as arrogant, stating, "Emily was a lovely girl who brought joy to others. You extinguished that light. You didn't love her, she was a trophy to you. The relationship was about your control through aggression and threats. Focus on your life sentence instead of luxury." She also sentenced Elliot to 9 months for perverting justice, to run concurrently. Elliot Turner wasn't the only one involved in the trial. His parents, Anita and Lee, were also implicated. They loved their son and tried to protect him after he committed his crime. Lee destroyed a letter in which Elliot confessed, while Anita removed a jacket from the room where the letter was supposedly found. Additionally, Anita delayed calling for an ambulance, allowing Elliot time to hide evidence and let the family create a credible story for the police. When questioned about her decision to postpone the call, Anita stated that she didn't believe Emily was dead. During cross-examination, they asked her if she believed Emily had ruined her son's life. After a 6-second pause, she answered, no. In the recording, Lee inquired whether they had made the right decision. Anita responded, "We've done the right thing." Both Anita Turner, 51, and Lee Turner, 54, were found guilty of obstructing justice and received sentences of 27 months in prison. In 2013, after serving half of their sentence, they continued to live in the house where Emily tragically died. Emily's father, Mark, broke down while discussing the verdicts. With support from his ex-wife Caroline and daughter Hannah, he expressed, "What we have heard over these 5 weeks has shocked and disgusted us. It is beyond belief that a man as evil as Elliot could treat such a gentle and loving girl like Emily so violently. We are incredibly proud that she came all the way across the world to seek a better life for herself. Unfortunately, this is the life that Elliot chose to take from her." Mark mentioned that there was much discussion about Elliot's bragging, and no one took his threat seriously until it was too late. He noted that even his mother dismissed it when he texted her about his intention to harm Emily. In October 2020, reports emerged that Elliot Turner's cellmates had assaulted him in prison. This incident followed his decision to display photos of Emily in his cell and brag about receiving letters from female admirers. The attack was triggered after he claimed he would soon go back to his luxurious lifestyle filled with champagne, Bentleys, and attractive women. In 5 years, Elliot Turner will be eligible to apply for early release. We can only hope that the parole board will act wisely and make the right choice concerning someone who has shown no remorse for his actions. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Romina Celeste Núñez Rodriguez. Romina Celeste Núñez Rodriguez was born in the fall of 1990 in Oñan, the capital of Paraguay. She was the oldest of 2 daughters in a poor working-class family. When the girls were still young, their parents divorced. Their mother, Miriam Rodriguez, had to raise them alone. She worked multiple jobs because her ex-husband did not provide any financial support and showed no interest in their well-being. When Romina was still in school, she started working to support her mother and younger sister. At 17, she entered a romantic relationship with a boy named Christopher. He courted her sweetly, and they dreamed of a future together. However, their happiness ended when Romina discovered she was pregnant and told Christopher. He responded by giving her an ultimatum that she could either have an abortion or they would break up for good. Romina was deeply wounded by her lover's words, but after talking to her parents, who she had always been close to, she made the decision to keep the baby. Her greatest fear was that having an abortion at such a young age might prevent her from ever becoming a mother in the future. Therefore, she felt she had no other option. Christopher, true to his word, ended all communication with her and showed no interest in Romina or their child's well-being. At 18, Romina gave birth to a son named Lucas. The arrival of the baby only made their already difficult financial situation worse. Money was extremely tight, and now Romina had to support her grandson too. Feeling depressed about their circumstances, she wanted to improve things and help her family, but she struggled to find a well-paying job in Paraguay. She called her aunt, who lived in sunny Spain. Her aunt invited her to come stay, saying it would be easier for Romina to settle there and that Europe offered more opportunities than Latin America. Without thinking too much, Romina packed only the essentials and bought a plane ticket to Spain. She left her 2-year-old son in the care of her mother and sister, planning to bring him to her once she found a new home and a stable job. In late summer 2010, Romina flew to Madrid and then traveled to Alcobendas, a provincial town, where she stayed at her aunt's house. She quickly started searching for a job, and luck was on her side. She secured a position as an administrator at a hotel, earning a good salary. She sent some of her earnings back home and used the rest to rent her own apartment, so as not to impose on her generous relatives. Romina soon met a man named Javier, and they entered into a tumultuous relationship. Like her, Javier had immigrated to Europe seeking happiness and a better life. He was originally from El Salvador, worked in construction, and appeared to be a serious individual. However, when Romina became pregnant, Javier was once again unprepared for the responsibility of parenthood. Despite this, they attempted to live together for a time. Unfortunately, shortly after their son was born, they ultimately separated. Romina found herself in a challenging situation, stranded in a foreign country with a newborn and unsure of what to do next. For a time, she returned to her aunt's house, where she received support and assistance. When the boy was about 6 months old, Romina returned to work because she couldn't afford to stay home. A few months later, she faced another shock. She had been ignoring her poor health and weakness, thinking they were just due to stress and fatigue. However, when Romina finally visited the doctor, she received a cancer diagnosis. She underwent several rounds of chemotherapy, lost her hair, and lost a significant amount of weight, but ultimately triumphed over the disease. After her treatment, she quickly recovered, continued working, and used wigs to cover her hair loss. Romina believed that after enduring such difficult challenges, a period of happiness was on the horizon. She saved money and planned to take her eldest son, along with her mother and sister, on a trip to Spain. In the summer of 2017, Romina attended an event with friends where she met a man named Raul Diaz. He was attractive, impressive, had a stable job, and was financially secure. Raul was drawn to Romina's beauty and began asking mutual friends about her. Romina was equally interested in Raul, and when he invited her on a date, she happily accepted. Raul was nearly 15 years older than Romina and worked as a lead process engineer at a large energy company. He had been through 2 divorces and had 2 teenage daughters from previous relationships, but Romina was not bothered by the age gap. Similarly, she was also a single mother, raising sons from her own 2 past relationships. After just 1 date, they quickly realized they were in love and didn't want to be apart. Romina, filled with excitement, enthusiastically shared her happiness with friends. Her new partner showered her with small gifts and thoughtful surprises nearly every day, organized romantic outings, sent flowers with heartfelt messages, and offered her compliments. Romina felt she had finally found true love and a man who would accept her and her sons. However, she soon began to hear unsettling rumors about him. People claimed that he had been rude and even cruel to his former wives, which had led to the end of both his marriages. Despite this, Romina didn't want to believe the rumors, although she noticed that Raul had no contact with either his ex-wives or his daughters. Despite their significant age difference and the presence of children from previous relationships, the couple did not let these factors stand in their way. Just 6 months after they met, they chose to move in together in a luxurious villa on Lanzarote, one of the Canary Islands. To Romina, this place felt like paradise, but her happiness was short-lived. Raul, who initially seemed like the perfect partner, soon revealed a controlling side. At first, they lived with Romina's youngest son, and Raul made an effort to take care of the child. Romina even believed he would be a great father to her boys. Raul promised her a long and happy life together, assuring her that he would take care of her and the children. Romina, deeply in love, trusted his words and eagerly accepted his proposal to marry him. However, Raul insisted they needed time alone together to fully enjoy their relationship before the wedding. Raul not only wanted to take Romina's eldest child from Paraguay, but he also hoped to distance himself from her youngest son. Despite this, Romina trusted her partner and ignored warnings from her friends who noticed his odd behavior. In June 2018, Raul purchased tickets for Romina and her child to travel to Paraguay, along with a return ticket solely for Romina. When she returned home and shared details about her partner, her mother and sister became uneasy about Raul's intentions. They suspected he simply wanted to get rid of her children. Romina was hurt by their comments and ended up having a small argument with her family. A few days later, she flew back to Spain, promising to return for the boys in the fall. When Romina got back, she received a warm welcome, and for 2 months, she was happily alone with Raul. However, in August, just a few days before the wedding, Raul violently attacked Romina. This was a shocking experience for her, but he pleaded for her forgiveness on his knees, assuring her that it would never happen again, and she chose to believe him. Romina did not report the incident or tell anyone about it. On August 10th, she attended the wedding with makeup covering her bruises, unaware that the man she was marrying would soon take her life. 2 weeks after the wedding, the girl returned to Paraguay, not to pick up her sons as she had initially planned, but to visit her family. Her mother and sister were confused by the changes they noticed in her since they last saw each other. Romina appeared upset and disoriented. She walked with a noticeable limp and had bruises on her neck, which she tried to cover with a scarf. When asked about her condition, Romina either remained silent or claimed she had hurt herself accidentally. She stayed at home for nearly a month, which surprised her relatives since she had just gotten married. Romina explained that her husband had suggested she visit her children because she missed them. Miriam praised her son-in-law for being generous, but she still couldn't understand why her daughter seemed so unhappy. In mid-September, Romina secretly borrowed money from her relatives to buy a return ticket to Spain because her husband refused to pay for it. This should have been a clear sign that returning was not a good idea, yet Romina still hoped for a happy resolution to their marriage. On September 17th, at the airport, her mother, sister, and sons saw her for the last time. After returning to her husband, Romina's life began to feel like a nightmare. Raul, who was using illegal drugs, no longer hid his addiction from her. When under the influence, he became aggressive and emotionally abused Romina. Each time she tried to leave, he promised to change and insisted that it wouldn't happen again. After the beatings and threats, there were often brief periods when Romina's husband would become loving and caring again, showering her with gifts and planning romantic outings. However, these peaceful moments became shorter over time, and instances of violence occurred more frequently. Just before the new year, Romina confided in her best friend that she feared her husband and worried he might eventually kill her. On December 29th, Raul beat her so severely that she had to seek medical attention. The hospital staff noticed something was wrong and considered calling the police to report the incident. At that moment, Raul arrived and insisted that Romina had simply fallen and that there was no need to involve the authorities. Romina went along with his story, declined hospitalization, and returned home with him. On January 1, 2019, Miriam, Romina's mother, repeatedly tried to call her daughter, but Romina did not answer. Concerned, Miriam then called her son-in-law to check on Romina, but he also did not answer. After several days of no contact, Miriam sent Raul a message indicating she would go to the police for help. This prompted Raul to quickly return her call, explaining that he and Romina had a fight on December 31st, after which she left with her belongings. He reassured Miriam that Romina would be okay and would return home soon, as this had happened before. Miriam, however, doubted Raul's explanation and felt something was wrong with her daughter. She insisted that Raul report the situation to the police. Finally, on January 8, pressured by Romina's family, Raul reported her disappearance. This time, he altered his story slightly, claiming that after their quarrel, Romina had taken some money from him and suggested that she might have gone to Paraguay to see the children, which is why he was not too worried before he heard from Miriam. What was Raul hiding? His testimony was filled with confusion and contradictions, raising many questions and suspicions. As a result, law enforcement decided to investigate the couple's life. After speaking with friends and family, they discovered that the marriage was far from perfect. Romina had often complained to loved ones about her husband's abuse, though she never provided details. Others frequently noticed bruises and injuries on her body. The police decided to place Raul under covert surveillance, tapping his phone conversations. However, Raul seemed to sense that he was being monitored and acted very cautiously, avoiding any behavior that might raise suspicion. Despite this, the investigation continued, and it was soon revealed that Romina had visited the hospital on December 29 with signs of severe beating. Her husband almost forcibly took her from the hospital, preventing her from going to the police. A few months ago, Romina filed a report for domestic violence but retracted it the following day. A week later, Raul, having calmed down somewhat, made a phone call to a relative in the police and carelessly mentioned that his wife was no longer alive and that her body would never be found. This statement prompted police to arrest him as the primary suspect and interrogate him thoroughly. Raul claimed that on New Year's Eve, his wife had been drinking heavily and started to argue with him. She demanded that he bring their children to live with them. When he said he wasn't ready for that, she had a violent outburst, started fighting, and began throwing things at him. Raul stated that he left his house for a few hours until things calmed down. Upon returning, he discovered Romina in the bathtub, unresponsive. He suggested that she had suffocated due to excessive drinking but was worried he might be suspected of her death or accused of murder. To protect himself, Raul decided to erase all evidence and report her as missing. Everyone was shocked by his admission of how he disposed of her body. He claimed he burned Romina's body on a barbecue in the backyard. Living in a luxury complex with a spacious area, he thought the neighbors wouldn't notice what he was doing or smell the burning flesh. However, he underestimated the situation because the barbecue did not function like a crematorium, and her remains were not fully burned after several hours. He then removed the body from the fire, cut it into parts, and put the pieces into separate bags. A few days later, he rented a car to transport the dismembered body to a remote and desolate area of the island, where he discarded the bags into the sea from the cliffs. The police spent weeks searching the shoreline and surrounding areas based on Raul's statements about where he had thrown his wife's remains. Divers and many volunteers participated in the search for body fragments underwater, but none of their efforts produced any findings. Meanwhile, on January 16, Raul was officially charged with domestic violence and the murder of his wife. This development followed a detailed search of his home, which utilized specialized equipment and luminol. This search uncovered multiple traces of washed blood in different rooms. Investigators discovered that Raul had been ordering caustic soda online, a substance used for removing organic materials and paint. In one of the second-floor rooms, he had scrubbed a bloody stain on the floor so aggressively that he damaged it and then attempted to cover it up with paint. According to investigators, this is the room where Raul dismembered his wife's body. Additionally, a broken piece of Romina's fingernail was found on the floor, which had traces of blood and Raul's skin cells, suggesting that she may have been alive and fought back during the incident. Also in the bathroom, investigators discovered Romina's contact lens stuck to the wall, possibly from a strong impact to her face. Despite extensive searching, law enforcement could not find any other remains. Meanwhile, a tourist called to report a lung fragment he found on the beach. He was unsure if it was from a human or an animal, but knowing that authorities were looking for a body in the area, he reported his discovery. By the end of February, forensic analysis confirmed that the lung fragment belonged to Romina. Raul continued to claim his innocence despite the evidence and examination results. He maintained his original belief that the woman had drowned in a bathtub while heavily intoxicated, even though evidence suggested there had been a violent struggle. He also stated that he did not use any tools to dismember the body. Instead, he claimed to have tried to burn it completely on a barbecue, asserting that the remains fell apart due to the heat, and he then placed them in bags to dispose of. This account was false for several reasons. First, the body of the adult Romina could not have fit in the fixture in his yard. Second, bones cannot become so fragile from fire that they fall apart without tools. Additionally, separating the lung from the body would require opening the chest, which cannot be done with bare hands. The investigation could not determine exactly how Raul killed his wife, but the evidence of a struggle in their home suggested that he may have beaten her to death. It was clear that Raul dismembered her body in the same room where he later repainted the floor to hide the blood. Eventually, faced with overwhelming evidence, he admitted that he accidentally killed his wife during a fight, contradicting his earlier claim that he found her dead in the bathtub. Despite his claims that she was drunk and violent, the defendant was found guilty in June 2023. Romina's family felt the sentence was too lenient. He received a 12.5-year sentence for involuntary manslaughter, 2 years for confirmed domestic violence, and 1 year for causing serious bodily harm to Romina in December 2018 when she was hospitalized. He also received several months for bodily abuse. In total, the combined punishment was less than 16 years in prison. Raul is currently serving his sentence while simultaneously trying to appeal the court's decision. The story of Romina Celeste Núñez Rodriguez serves as a poignant reminder of the devastating consequences of domestic violence and the complex struggles faced by individuals seeking a better life. Despite her resilience and efforts to overcome adversity, Romina became a victim of a controlling and abusive relationship, ultimately leading to her untimely demise. The court's lenient verdict against her perpetrator reflects the ongoing challenges in addressing domestic violence, leaving her family and loved ones grappling with their loss and advocating for justice. As we reflect on Romina's case, it is crucial to continue raising awareness about the importance of supporting victims and holding abusers accountable to prevent such tragedies in the future.